4, 3, 2, 1.
Bore da, croeso I cyfarfod Bwrdd Iechyd Prifysgol Cwm Tap Morgannwg. Hoffwn I estyn croeso cynnes I bawb sy'n gwylio heddiw. Good morning and welcome to the bi-monthly meeting of Cwm Tap Morgannwg University Health Board, which is held in public. With the board members, we are meeting in person today. We're also broadcasting today's meeting of the board live, providing an opportunity for anyone with internet access to observe in real time using a link that was shared via various channels prior to the meeting. I'd like to therefore extend a welcome to all who may be observing the meeting today. A copy of the video of the meeting will also be available following the meeting on our website for anyone who wishes to view it. In relation to today's proceedings, I'd like to note the following. Colleagues will be aware that we continue our commitment to ensure we conduct all board business in an open and transparent way. Live streaming our board meetings has been well received and allows real-time access to all of our stakeholders to observe over the internet. Firstly, various of the reports being received today have previously been scrutinised by the board's committees in the weeks leading up to the board meeting. An example of this would be Integrated Performance Dashboard Report, with relevant aspects of that report being scrutinised at CTM's Quality and Safety Committee and CTM's Planning, Performance and Finance Committee. The scrutiny afforded by board committees is set out in highlight reports prepared for each board meeting, which are listed under our consent agenda items. Secondly, we will be taking a very short break during the meeting after about an hour at around 11 o'clock and possibly again at 12 o'clock, depending on the timings. For board members, firstly, questions on the consent agenda items have been sought in advance of the meeting. Any questions received that have been responded to prior to the meeting, and the questions and responses received will be included within the minutes of the meeting. Secondly, as referenced earlier in my introduction, where it is evident reports have received significant scrutiny at board committees, the board will take this into account when receiving this item and therefore the amount of time focused on it. Thirdly, as part of the steps we take to seek and continually improving the work of the board, at the end of today's meeting, I will be asking colleagues how you think we have done. There are some questions prompts set out in the regard at the end of the agenda. I encourage all board members to keep this in mind and offer reflections and suggestions in this regard. All committee board chairs have adopted the same approach after each committee meeting. For presenters, when introducing a report or giving a presentation, presenters need to take into account that board members will have read the report in advance of the meeting, and hence the board will only need to be made aware of any issues that may have changed since the report was drafted. I'd like to welcome Michelle Morrison, occupational therapist, and Daisy Wilcox, perinatal team leader, who are here to present a listening and learning story which relates to perinatal services. Sally Davis, our deputy medical director, who is attending the meeting on behalf of Dom Herbert, medical director. Sarah Utley, Audit Wales, who is attending the meeting virtually to present agenda items 6.5 and 6.6. I have been advised that the following board members are joining today's meeting virtually via the live stream. That is Linda Thomas, independent member, Anne Morris, associate member, and I believe James is joining us as well.
Thanks.
Apologies for absence are Nicola Milligan, independent member, Dom Herford, executive medical director. Has anyone have anything they wish to declare at this point in respect to declarations of interest? I could then go on to item 2.1, which is the listening and learning story. I'm pleased to invite Michelle Morrison and Daisy Wilcox to present today's listening and learning story. I invite Michelle to say a few words before a video is shared of the patient's experience. Michelle and Daisy.
So we brought this story today for you to hear. The story is from a mother that was referred to our service by a health visitor. The baby was 5 months old at the time, and she had a significant dip in her mental health. They realised that she was struggling with anxiety, low mood, and she had some suicidal ideation as well. So we had the referral. We carried out an assessment, which then identified that she also had some severe intrusive thoughts towards herself and her baby. And she was struggling with the transition into motherhood. And we provided a very holistic approach to her care. She had support from several members of our team: nursing, psychiatry, psychology and occupational therapy. And this is her story of her journey through the first year after having a baby.
Well, I spoke to my GP originally, who kind of suggested possible postnatal depression and gave me a link online to contact like a counsellor. But at that point, I really wasn't really taking information in. I wasn't able to explain fully like how I felt, because a lot of the thoughts that I was having were really dark and scary, and it was scary to think that I had to say them to somebody, and I had a fear that if I told them to the GP that they would inform social services and my child would be taken away straight away. So I didn't follow up on that initial counselling link that they sent me, because I just didn't have the capacity, I think, to do that. And a few weeks later, I saw my health visitor, and I just spoke to her about how I was feeling, and I just said, you know, I'm really struggling with, initially I thought it was because the baby had reflux really severely, so we were in and out of hospital quite a lot, and I just wasn't coping very well with that. But then the more we kind of got talking, the more I realised that it was a bit more than that. And she realised that it was a bit more than that, so we arranged an appointment for me to go and fill some forms in with her and talk about the perinatal mental health team as a possibility for a referral. And then, yeah, without her taking that step, really, I wouldn't really have, I don't even want to think about where I would be without that. And I think being referred to the perinatal mental health team was the best thing that happened to me. I had my initial assessment over the phone, and even then I don't think I really got everything out that I needed to, in terms of, like, I think particularly it was the intrusive thoughts, so the really dark thoughts that I was having towards my baby, about myself in general, and, you know, that feeling suicidal. It was almost like I couldn't voice it. If I said it and made it real, if I didn't say it, I could just carry on and no one would know. And you know, I just felt like maybe I had to just suck it up and go with it. So yeah, after having my assessment, they felt that occupational therapy would be useful for me, so that's when I met you. I think it was clear from like the first time that we met, I think that I needed a lot more help than originally was thought. I think it was helpful to have somebody in person to speak to. That really helped me feel more comfortable, and I think just because you were so calm and approachable, helped me kind of, I think it just took the lid off, and I think I just poured everything out at that point, and kind of started being able to talk about those things that I was really scared to say, because I think I'd reached that point where I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think it was only a week or so before that assessment that I'd actually just left the house. I felt really suicidal, and that's when I went to stand on the bridge, and I had quite a blackout and not really remembering a lot of that, and I think that's when I really realised like something is wrong here. It's been a hard, long journey. My baby's 15 months now, and it's been wild. I think is a way to describe it. It's not how I expected my first year of being a mum to be. The beginning was very difficult. I didn't feel like I bonded with my child. I just really, it was just a struggle. It was just such a struggle, and I hated being a mum. I didn't want to be here anymore. I, had awful thoughts about hurting my child or hurting myself. Since getting the help and treatment that I've needed, I'm able to kind of look back now and identify that actually there were some really good moments as well, and particularly the support that I've had with the perinatal team, and the therapy that I've had as well, looking at those positive moments and building on that, is really helping me now become more confident at being his mum, because I'd say for the first 12 months I didn't feel like I was his mum, and now, on his first birthday, on that day was the first day that I felt like I could tell him I loved him, and I felt like I genuinely meant it, whereas I didn't feel that before. Now, like yesterday, he came up to me, cuddled me, and gave me a kiss, which he's never done before, and I just burst into tears because that's something I wanted for so long, and it's not something that I ever experienced in the beginning of me getting ill, and when I was in my darkest moments, that wasn't something that I ever thought could be.
Very powerful. I'll invite any members who would like to ask any questions or make any comments to what's been shared with us today, please.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard, Daisy. Thank you very much. How common is this, and obviously condition, but this common is this response to a young lady who's had a child? Yeah, is it something rare or is it something?
It's very common, to be honest.
Sounds weird.
Yeah, 20% of mothers, isn't it? Yeah, it is very prevalent. We know that the rate of suicide increases dramatically in the perinatal period. So pregnant women and women in the first year following birth, suicide is the biggest cause of death above cancer.
Can I ask a supplementary to that then? Because we know about the first 1,000 days of a child's life. So what's the impact of the child in relation, if mum is going through this sort of situation, what's the impact on the child and what structures are put in place to support the child?
We follow there's 5 streams. So we follow the bubble well stream. So, and there's the parents and infant or CTM team was developing, because we do identify there are ACEs to motherhood experiences, and that does have an impact on not just child's family, it's the extended, it's the whole umbrella approach, and as much as we are there for them, we're dealing with 2 lives or 3 sometimes at a time. So yes, there are structures there in place to secure healthy lives in the first 1,000 days moving forward from a CTM perspective. And from a Welsh Government perspective as well, there is a big drive on, setting standards across the whole of Wales and having parity of care about what care we deliver
through our standards of care. So there's 3 standards for perinatal care: standard type 1, type 2, type 3. We currently meet for CTM type 2 and 3, and we're 5% of standard 1. And it's just about providing the same service across Wales, really, and we're a time critical and time limited service. So we've got a lot of pathways, or there's the All Wales pathways in there, so there's 10 pathways, and so we are 6 and 7. So we deal with, moderate to severe cases, and there are strategies in place for each step before they hit our service. There's a number of edges to our service. We are maternity, GP, health visitors, mental health. We're everything, really. So, I mean, the purpose of this story, isn't it, is to give some assurances that even though this mother has a really dark experience, there is hope. There isn't permanency in feeling that way. It's very, actually, as a mental health nurse, if you can get people well quite quick, and it's just instilling that confidence, really. And what we feel as well from CTM, because we cover the 3 geographical sites, there's a population health in each site. So addressing that, but also just being able to provide the same service, the parity care, not just for CTM, but it's across the whole of Wales. We got the mother and baby unit now in Wales, which is great. It's only 18 months old. So that's a service for mothers as well. So if they did need inpatient service, then they don't need to leave Wales, which is huge, isn't it, for a family? But also just to note that we've got a really good handle demographically and prevalence-wise of mothers who've got existing mental health problems. But the most inpatients we have are mothers that's never had any service before for mental health. So it's about, supporting and educating GPs, our third sector, voluntary. It's a whole system approach, really. So as much as we are under adult services, we touch everybody's area. So
Thank you for your interest, great answer. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just around those assurances that you were talking about. Can I ask you about capacity and thresholds? So to what extent do you feel that you're meeting the demand for the service that you provide? And is it getting easier or harder for mothers to access the service that you provide?
That's a good question, actually. We do follow the All Wales criteria. So we do benchmark ourselves as severe to moderate. Anybody can refer in, you can self-refer in. We got a duty line now that wasn't there before I was in post. We got champions across CTM for perinatal champions. We got 16. We got a specialist midwife in our team. That's a gateway into, for birth trauma specifically. So I think we do, as much as we align ourselves to standards and criteria, we are flexible because we can't really rigidly stick to our operational policy. Like I said, there's a population health. We got to change with that. There's been peaks and troughs. There's been a bit of a surge of births following COVID. There's been a surge in just like, men being referred to the team. So more inclusivity, more diversity, same-sex couples. We got to move with the times, really. So we're a reflection of what's going on in society, really, I would say.
We try to be as accessible as possible, but we're also quite aware that more people are opening up about their mental health, which is something that we're really keen to promote, mothers especially, because as this lady said, she was very concerned that when if she spoke about her thoughts, that her child would just be taken away from her, and that's something that we hear, we hear that quite a lot from women. So we do try to be accessible, but we are still quite a small team, for quite a large geographical area.
We're very much in the infancy of, just systemically putting everything into place and just being assured that what we do is a good specialist service. That's what we're developing. We want to be more than generic. We're trying to be more specialised in our therapies and, you know, targeted approach, because we do see recovery quite quick.
And really positive results
Yeah.
from that recovery.
Yeah.
Because I think the other question, we know that if a woman doesn't receive the support that they need in this time critical period, there are long lasting effects for the child growing up socially, educationally. We know that there's, you know, going to be an impact on their kind of their upbringing and potentially the life that they will lead. It's very, very important that women get this support when they need it and they are able to access.
Sorry, I got a few hands up here. Did you want to
No,
respond?
no, I was just on that point. I suppose I was just going to. Some of this is also, as you said, taking the stigma away from people feeling they can say, isn't it? So presumably, a key part of this is also talking to women whilst they're in pregnancy to say, you know, these things might happen after the birth, but that's entirely normal. And there's I presume you work, obviously mentioned work closely with maternity and GPs and others, but there's something about socialising the conversations more actively, isn't it? So it isn't, it's just, it's not seen as, oh, that's the person who's had, you know, that problem after birth. It's, these things do happen then. And as you say, the general awareness raising around mental health is a positive thing. But in this particular group of people, it's trying to normalise it a bit more, isn't it? We do it, so presumably think, like you say, voluntary sectors, community groups, people like NCT and all these, you know, getting people to sort of discuss it and raise it as an issue. Hopefully then if people do experience it, they can recognise they're experiencing it and they won't be afraid to come forward.
Yeah. So I think from this story, the learning has come out of it is, as a perinatal, so we've got a state group every month, and there's going to be a leaflet about pregnancies, what to do in a timely way. That's going to sit in the discharge pack from maternity.
Right.
Just like with the safer sleeping information. So it's just one leaflet, but we are going to probably do some more co-production work with our ladies and you know, offer that out to all sectors really.
That's great.
Because this lady had a history of anxiety and depression. It wasn't a new thing to her, but even with the history that she had, she wasn't aware of the effect that it could have postnatally on her.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the things that she was really keen to get involved in as well, as promoting it, you know, and having the red flags for people to be very aware of during pregnancy or even, you know, preconception as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I could invite Jane then, please.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the story with us. It's really powerful because those months after birth, times when one can experience really troubled thoughts. I'm interested in what you say about the pathways in, and clearly this lady didn't feel she could self-refer because of what we've already discussed. I'm struck by the importance of that health visitor knowing where to go and where one can get help. How are you making sure the professionals who are likely to come into contact with young mothers can actually know that you're there and that there's a service that can be accessed?
So our regional and national lead, Sharon Fernandez, she's actually got Marcus to come now, our community health lead for CTM involved. So whatever kind of work or initiatives we're working on, that is geared down then for, you know, assurances that that's cascaded down to the necessary people. And also health visitors come and have spoke days with us. You know, our specialist midwife does health visiting. So for new health visitors coming out from the university, she aligns herself with that training package. So there's good awareness of what's out, but also we are going to have some links on the patient-facing website as well as Shane's point about the pathways. We got a perinatal care buttons on now, which has got apps on that we provide to maternity GPs. We attend to GP cluster meetings, so we're trying to disband all of what we've put together. So yeah, that's what we're in the infancy of. So that's the only thing, we're only 16 months in really from that point. So yeah, I think we are building partnerships.
Definitely.
trying to get everything, you know, in order.
Thank you.
And in a timely way, because it's time critical.
Thanks. Thank you very much. This would be great ones to come in and invite Lauren after that. I think both great.
Only two quick questions. Thank you both for coming today, and it's not as scary as what maybe. You mentioned that this lady had an anxiety condition. Were there any missed opportunities at attending booking, do you think, which potentially we could have caught? And second question is, can you give us a flavour of, I guess, how many referrals come in and how many meet the threshold?
So the lady would have met with a midwife,
Yeah.
you know, at the routine appointments, and she would have been asked about her mental health at those appointments. At the time, her mental health was very well managed. She was taking medication, her mental health was stable, the baby was planned. So at that time, no, I don't think anything was missed. Towards the end of the pregnancy, her anxiety increased, and that was due to some complications with the pregnancy. But it was following the birth that the mental health condition kind of increased in severity. And I think it was the stress, the baby had reflux, the baby didn't sleep. There was the baby was admitted into hospital. There were a lot of additional stresses on her at that point, which impacted on her mental health. And that, together with the stigma of disclosing that then to a health professional like the GP, prevented her from accessing that help earlier.
Thank you. And then numbers?
Referral wise, it's peaks and troughs. So for a number of weeks, we reached having 6 referrals a week. But in the last 2 weeks, it's been 20, 13, 13 today. Our entity is happening. And so it's very much this quiet period. Usually you'll find now we'll start to get a little bit busier, but it's reflected in maternity. So however, it's like the Ferris wheel is going like that. We're a reflection of that.
Yeah.
You know, 850 last year,
Yeah.
on average. Yeah. Approximately 850 referrals we had last year, and we're a team of 7.
Yeah.
So we're 7 professionals within the team.
Yeah.
You know, when we have 850 referrals in, approximately, it's a lot.
Reassuring. So looking at the data, we started to, you know, look at the data really, and what we found was that our referrals, there was a lot of referrals coming in, but we weren't actually accepting a lot of referrals, and why was that? But I think it's just about educating, referrers coming in, but also we're taking 50% now, which is about right. And just from a maternity point of view, I feel they're referring, you know, and booking is okay, this person, it's okay, so that's fine. But that's a lot of signposting as well, don't we? You know, so it's fine for anyone to refer in. There may not be anything wrong, but it's good for them to come in and just have that knowledge about what's for waiting and what to expect, because we know that, you know, after giving birth, the first 4 months are critical. You're more likely to develop psychosis in the first day to 10 days of giving birth. So for our liaison services, for our, you know, inpatient stay, for maternity, there's a lot of work. Most of our inpatient stays have been from a liaison assessment. You know, somebody's C-section and is in it for that. It's time. It's first 1 to 10 days critical for psychosis.
Okay, thank you. If I could invite Lauren and then Lisa and then okay, Lauren.
Really grateful for you coming today. Thanks so much. I'm the Director of Therapies and Health Science, so fantastic to hear about the impact of the AHPs as part of your MDT, so OT psychology. Really specialist roles. I wonder if there's a network that you can tap into in terms of sharing good practice with other sites and support and peer supervision and things.
So we have a Welsh network of perinatal occupational therapists. It sounds very grand, but there are only 6 of us in the whole of Wales. So, but yeah, we meet regularly, we share good practice, and we also link into the specialist section of the Royal College of Occupational Therapy as well, which is UK wide, which is very, very helpful. and we're able to access a lot of their learning and their training and their forums, you know, so that is, yeah, that's a great benefit. Also makes us appreciate what people have in different areas of the country as well, compared to what we're developing now in Wales. So yes, that's how we do it from occupational therapy.
Truth is a lone practitioner sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah,
Well,
it can be.
Yeah, please supervision as well as clinical psychologist. And then for me, I'm on work stream. I do attend all of the perinatal network meetings, so the regional and national ones. And then we have an offsite review every year of our service and how we are meeting the standards, because we should meet them all by 2024, and we're on target for that. So we have a review. We have our review is the 20th of April now. So we have an annual review, and then we have feedback on that review then.
brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could then invite Lisa in then, please.
Morning, everyone. I'm the Director of Social Services and Associate Member of the Board. Thank you for the presentation, really, really powerful. Excellent to see sort of positive stories, but more of a comment for me than a question. And it would be remiss of me to say it, that's my role as social services, is we need to try and take that stigma away from social services being sort of, you know, if there's an issue, we'll remove the child. This is an excellent service. So I think there needs to be that really multi-agency working, that link with the different agencies, and maybe it's worth sort of having a presentation to the early help hubs across the 3 LAs so that we can have that, you know, preventative piece of work, and obviously will help you with capacity as well if you're having, you know, a number of referrals. You know, if they knock on our door, the first thing we want to do is support. We don't want to remove the child. So I think it's important that we sort of pass that message as well to the public and work together on it. So I just, it's a sort of a plea really to perhaps do that work together.
I think it is a message to the public, because actually when we do have experiences where we do have to, you know, refer on, because, you know, that is quite typical for our work, is how you deliver that. How you deliver that message, how it's received. So I think it's got to be said in a, you know, like you said, it's a supportive measure. And we don't get bad experiences in delivering that in that way. So if that was delivered to the public in that way, there would probably be less, you know, hesitation about accessing support. So that's what it is.
So I'm guessing, Lisa, then the opportunity for these guys to link up with you perhaps pick that point up about doing some joint work with the social services departments on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there'll be training opportunities as well with staff within the early help hubs so that we can make those links and have that support network. So like if you give them my contact detail, I'll sort that out.
Yeah, we'll do that, Lisa. We'll pass your details on to Daisy and
Okay, I say just two key points for me. Excellent, so 3 really. Excellent presentation, very powerful. Help to inform on the work that you're doing. I was interested to see the art as well at the beginning, because people struggle to share their emotions sometimes and find it easier to draw. And I could see, obviously the colours were changing as time went on to thing. And certainly the outcome at the end, where she was saying that her daughter, her son came up to kiss her, you know, was showing about how difficult things were in that first year to one of bonding and togetherness and stuff, which was really good.
Sorry, I didn't want to lose the opportunity. So I'm Simon, I manage the communications team here, and clearly, as everyone has said, promotion and awareness with mums to be, families, neighbours, are really, really key. So I just wanted to say, we'd really value a conversation after the board at some point as well to work out how we can help, and also Lisa, picking up Lisa's point as well as what can we do to create a kind of a piece of work across both social and healthcare as well.
Ultimately, another 2 ladies want to do patient story. One of our ladies is currently in Pakistan, so she wants to come and do a patient story with her partner. So that's quite inclusive.
Yes.
And then actually a midwife who was referred into our team as well wants to do a story, because I think she underestimated, you know, the impact. So that's another angle as well.
Simon and his team can liaise with you to try and do some of the covers around it, help you promote the service.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Just to close up, well, thank you, Michelle and Daisy, for sharing the story. Lovely to see you again, Daisy. And a really excellent piece of work that you know, something that continue to do within the health board, and obviously noting the comments about working closer with our social service colleagues as well, and the multidisciplinary approach you're taking to this. So well done to you both in sharing such a good work and a positive story and a real good example of the work that you're taking here today. So thank you. Okay, so in conclusion, the board resolves to note the story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We could then go on to item number 3, which is the consent agenda. To ensure we focus on business critical activity and discussions, we continue to use the consent agenda for this meeting. I would like to remind everyone that highlight reports from board committees are routinely included in the consent agenda for formal voting and are placed on the main agenda for discussion only when there are specific areas identified in the report for escalation to the board. I'd also like to remind colleagues that many of the items on both the consent and main agenda have already received significant scrutiny by our board committees prior to being put before the board today. It is important to note, therefore, that the level of discussion and debate at the meeting today is not a representation of the totality of time and consideration undertaken in relation to these issues on behalf of the board under the board scheme of delegation to committees. Given colleagues will have had the opportunity to read all the items placed under the consent agenda in advance of this meeting, are there any issues that anyone wishes to move to the main agenda for discussion? No? Okay, I therefore propose that all members present are happy to approve and note all items as requested. We then go on to item 4.1. Are there any matters arising not considered on the action log? No?
Sorry, just on the action of at 6.1.1, the action has been completed. That's in progress. That's for you to talk to one of the information officers. Yeah, there's a further action for me now, but that one's completed.
Okay, thank you for that, Sally. So for noting, yes, action 6.1 has been completed. Okay, if I could go then on to 5.1, which is delivering our purpose and strategic direction, the new Velindre Cancer Centre full business case. I invite the Prosser to highlight the main items from the report, which is for noting and approving. I know that this report was received and discussed at the Planning, Performance and Finance Committee held on the 22nd of March 2023, where members agreed to endorse the report for board approval. Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. So we're considering the full business case today, which consists of 5 elements. We actually see 4 of those. We've looked at the economic and financial cases in closed session, and we'll reflect on our conclusions in that meeting as part of this discussion. Placed in front of us today is the strategic and the management case, setting out how the development of a replacement unit for the Velindre Cancer Centre meets strategic requirements in terms of the environment, the development of cancer services, etc., and setting out what the considerations have been in the development of that case. It is consistent with the outline business case that we approved as a board back in 2017. So what we're looking at today is essentially any shifts in relation to the case or any further details that have emerged. I would say we don't get sight of the health board at this stage of the commercial case. That is a process which is subject to approval of full business cases. That then sets out the context for Velindre to then enter into an arrangement with a provider for the commercial business case under the MIMS arrangement, the mutual interest. And what's the other end? Mutual investment model. Thank you. So I'm going to take us down to the key impacts on us as a health board. Of course, because we have already signed off the radiology case previously, which is where a lot of the benefit of the
for service provision will come with the additional provision of Linux accelerators, both at Velindre and at Neville Hall. So I'm going to take us down to it's page 18, I think, of the, sorry, I've got a system that's struggling to keep up with me. So yeah, actually, let's go to tables 17 and 18, because these essentially highlight the changes in financial contribution that the health board will have to make when they send out returns. They relate to the increased costs of facilities management, IT, security, etc. And our share, which is set out in table 18, is an additional £1.349 million a year. The benefits essentially they're set out back up on page 12. They're essentially those of a much better environment for care, much better experience for patients and staff, and the buildings being designed for environmental sustainability. From our previous conversations, I don't think we have any doubt that the building that is currently being occupied is inadequate and that a new solution is required. Obviously, in the current financial context, it's not easy for us to make this investment. However, on balance, I think because it's consistent with the OBC, which we had signed off, it feels that it's an investment that is one that we should consider. I know that we have, concerns that Velindre do actually really make best use of the building to help us justify and see some more benefit from that investment. And as such, we're proposing that if we approve and sign off the business case, that we also send a letter that outlines what a difficult decision this has been for us, but seeks assurances around value for money and improved and increased services going forwards in order to help justify that investment.
Thank you, Linda. I invite members to raise any questions or comments for Linda. Well,
yeah, just picking up on what you said, just for the record, I chaired the Performance Planning and Finance Committee, and we've gone through many iterations of this particular report, the outline business case, the full case, and after a lot of questioning and scrutiny, I just want to confirm that, as you've already said, Chair, that the PPF committee have approved and support this business case in the way that Linda has outlined.
Thank you for that, Mel. Are there any other comments or questions? Gary?
Yes, I just want to endorse what the chair of the PPF committee has said, and the commentary towards the end of what Linda was saying towards the end around the sort of commentary that is going to be contained within the letter to Welsh Government as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gareth. Are there any further comments or questions from anyone? No? Okay. Thanks to Linda for presenting the report. In concluding the item, I would now like to ask if the board are happy to approve the recommendations contained within the report. So yes, okay, confirmed and approved. We can then go on to item 5.2, please. And we want now to refer to the integrated medium-term plan for 2023 to 2026. I invite Linda Prosser to highlight the main items from the report, which is for noting. I note that this report was received and discussed at the Planning, Performance and Finance Committee held on the 22nd of March 2023, where members noted the report. Linda.
Thank you. Can I ask that? Oh, it is there. It is, look, by magic. Let me just see. So I'm going to just use these slides to, and my colleagues, Sally May, Finance, and Gethin Hughes, who will also come in to describe the sort of framing and the consequences of this plan. I'm just going to describe how we've arrived at the version that is before you today. So slide 2, please. Thank you. So we are today asking the board to endorse this plan for submission to Welsh Government, noting that you can't actually agree the plan since it doesn't meet our legal duties to have a statutory of financial balance over 3 years. Sally will describe that in a bit more detail. Given that we had a conversation about this last week, I just want to really emphasise the journey that we've been on during the last week. So you'll remember that we were suggesting a version of the plan last week. We called it Choice 4, but you'll be reminded of that in a minute, which was a consistent financial position with the accountable officer letter that we submitted at the end of February. Since then, there have been some moves in a favourable direction and some further conversations with Welsh Government around financial positions, and we have been able to shift to choice 3, which is the one that ensures that we break even in year, which is consistent with our previous financial strategy. So that puts us on more sound footing, notwithstanding all the risks, in terms of consistency and focus. However, because of those favourable moves, we're still able to protect the investment profile that we talked about last week under choice 4. On the basis, though, of your feedback, we've made a couple of changes. One is that we have squeezed very slightly the planned care investment from 6 million to 5.5, in order that we can make £500,000 available for investment in stroke, and to really, start to make the really critical changes that everybody feels is so important in that area. Nobody was comfortable that we couldn't see any progress there. However, it does mean that we've only been able to allocate an additional £1 million to digital and only £1.5 million to overseas recruitment, which of course is a bit of that should be a virtuous cycle. But we can't go any further until we've made the £27 million savings and managed out the risks that are in the rest of the plan. So I just thought it would be helpful for me to make it really clear what we're presenting today and how it's moved since last time. Statutory requirements you're very familiar with, and you know the history. You also know the sort of complexity. Oh, sorry, I'm moving mine on and I'm forgetting to tell you to. Yeah, so can you go on to slide 4, please?
It's Chloe outside.
Oh, Chloe. Thank you. So it's always a very complex business writing these plans because everybody's got an idea about what should be in it, and they don't always tally. So, you know, this is a complex process of trying to square various circles and, you know, meet various requirements through different means and sometimes through the same means. Yeah, next slide. And of course, sorry, this is hard to read. I think this is an important point to dwell on because it's important to note that we are submitting a plan that is still £84.5 million overspent, and that whilst that's not dissimilar to other organisations, it creates adds up to a big problem, and we are being asked to consider what are the big choices that we could and should be making, or considering at least, to close that gap further. And we've looked at things that we're looking at things that can be done. However, as you can see in this slide, the risks that are associated with that have to be taken account as well. And I think we're not including any of these in our plan at the moment because the risks of each of those as sort of single actions, you know, banning agency, freezing all vacancies, reducing our nursing care standards, you know, for all of those, there's reasons why those aren't acceptable to do as a sort of, you know, as a undifferentiated action. So what we are essentially as execs commending to the board is that rather than trying to consider any of these actions, we actually work within our current framework of reducing agency because there's a proper plan, changing services because we're going through due process, not, you know, axing things indiscriminately. But obviously there's more work to be done on that, and I know, Chair, that the chairs have been asked to submit this list in a bit more detail, but I think we can't do that without recognising the risks involved. So plan timetable, that's it all has to go in tomorrow. Sorry, Chloe, can you go on now to slide 8, please, and I'll hand over to Sally.
Okay. So there are a few numbers that are moving around in this, and just to sort of explain how it works. So when we met last week, we agreed, didn't we, that we would, we looked at the overall position and we agreed that we would try to maintain the integrity of our financial strategy, which was to deliver break even in year, noting that our brought forward deficit had deteriorated significantly, and that would come under some challenge. In that brought forward deficit, that includes energy, and we also noted that was very volatile and worked through. So we applied the 8.5 million, which was the difference at the time, to well, it is the difference to a range of priorities which Linda has just highlighted. So 5.5 million into planned care, 500,000 into stroke, 1.5, which is less than originally asked around overseas nursing. We need to think about the risk management around that. And then the balance to digital, although that is on top of an existing baseline investment of 1 million into digital and 1 million into digitising patient notes. So overall, digital has had an increase of 3 million, which is in the baseline, is now in the position that we're reflecting. In terms of, since we had that discussion last week, there's again been a slight tweak in the amount that's set aside or estimated for energy, which takes us to, so it reduces our brought forward deficit slightly, which gives us a 76.7 million overall position. But in the absence of a balanced plan, we should still expect further challenge around that underlying deficit, because if you remember the conversation, we were expecting that to sit at 28 million rather than the position we're now at. In terms of risk, it's important to note, though, that the bottom-up plans are still showing a higher deficit than the one we've included within this, and there are significant pressures across all our services that have continued to sort of build over the last year. So we are treating that as a risk to the plan rather than deteriorate it further, but it is important that all board members understand the level of risk we're carrying in the plan. Move to the next slide then. So these are the sort of just set out changes between the various versions. So that is a sort of looks like an improvement in the plan and also the accountable officer letter, but it's basically simply movements in estimates around energy. And the reason for saying that is it's so material. So if the market moves in the opposite direction to the one it's currently doing, we are very, very exposed because of the extent of the sort of variation in year. If we just drop down the slide again. So this was the choice that we went through, just to remind everybody last week in terms of the application of the 8.5. And you asked us as execs to go away and to look at how we applied that. And that's the conversation. There was a really helpful conversation in which everybody worked through the best possible application of that to deliver on the priorities and manage our risks. So that is our proposed breakdown, as we've just said several times over, but that will help us to move forward on some of our objectives And in particular, we've all run through the planned care investments. That takes us over the allocation we were given by Welsh Government for planned care by a significant degree, but recognises the level of challenge we've got. At the moment, we're applying some of that recurrently and some of that non-recurrently. So we will come back round to these decisions next time we do a plan. So if we just drop down again. So it's just worth us understanding where we are in terms of how the movement has worked through. You can see that that further reduction in energy cost pressure is actually quite significant at 5.1 million. We are just using estimates at this point. We are yet to contract. So you'll also remember that under Chair's action, we've revised our approach to energy purchasing. We'll continue on the same basis for this year, and we're currently buying energy for the sort of first 6 months of the year, and then for the second 6 months we will move into a Crown Commercial Services framework in common with much of the rest of the NHS across the UK and local governments, particularly in Wales, who use that approach. So that will help to balance some of that volatility, but we still have risk as we move from one mechanism to another, and that forward purchasing bit. So I do need to keep emphasising that risk. So this is our draft plan at this point in time. So we have a deficit there of 79.6 on a current basis. We just move through. So this is just to give you an understanding of the brought forward challenge. And I think that's really important, because one of the sort of fundamental reasons that we are looking at the size of the challenge we are now, it is the failure over a number of years, entirely understandable given the pressures that services have been under and during COVID in particular, to deliver the savings expectation that's sort of built into our overall sort of financial settlements. So on that basis, we've seen a build-up of cost over time. So the current deficit at the start of this year of 44.5. I say 22, 23, just to make sure. I'm not sure which year I'm in at this point. It gets very confusing. This year, we've got further recurrent shortfalls in savings of 7.1 that's built up during 22, 23, and overspends, which reflects some of that pressure across our services we've recognised around, particularly in unscheduled care, of 9.3 million, ongoing local COVID response costs of 10 million, which reflects changes in services over the period. There are some opportunities for us to look at that and push down on that further, but that's what we're planning at the moment. And then the ongoing exceptional energy costs, reducing but still significant. Just to remind people, our opening budget for energy prior to this inflationary period was only 8.2 million. So it's, even at this point, it's double. So the shortfall in savings, though, over the last 3 years is about 35 million of our problem. That does suggest there might be some opportunities, but we recognise the pressures and the need to balance quality, performance and finance as we move forward. Just drop down. So how we're managing that out with services is also important for the board to understand. So we're issuing a control total. So we haven't gone out with the budgets, which would be way lower than the expenditure rate at the moment. We've set a control total, asked to deliver which asks people to deliver an improvement on their forecast outturn positions for this year. That's forecast outturn, not forecast recurrent deficit, which would be higher. And that means, in addition to the improvement targets and stretch targets, they'll also need to deliver non-recurrent benefits as they have in this year into next year, and manage in-year pressures to deliver. Within the plan, as we discussed when we met at PPF, there is a very challenging savings target of 27.3 million. That's the higher, which if you include some of the managing non-recurrent issues, could look as high as 52.3. That is a major challenge given where we've delivered before. You know, this year our recurrent savings delivery looks at around 10 million, 17 in total. So to get to 27.3 needs a step change, but we have all committed, and the services have committed to doing that, which is why we're putting forward this plan. So if we just move down, but in the control total, it's just worth having that there's that sort of ongoing risk. So savings target 27.3 million. That's savings for at the moment identified sits at only 15.9, including 3.7 million of non-current schemes. Those are the ratings, so there is more work to be done to get to the full programme, and we're working with care groups and directorates to achieve that at the moment. And Gethin and I have had a series of finance meetings with all the care groups over the last week or so, where the future year is the focus, as opposed to sort of we're only looking sort of for a short time period at the in-year. We need to develop pipeline schemes as well going into the future financial years, so we can start to give that certainty to Welsh Government colleagues that we've got a robust process for returning to a sustainable financial position. Just drop down. So just worth us going through, these are our risk table that will be submitted. It's a bit small, but I think what you can see is there are some very significant risks within that, and savings delivery is one of the most significant. We've got a worst case risk there of 15 million, which we've got a probability at the moment of 50%. But as we work forward into next year, we need to try and manage all of these risks and reduce the probability of them materialising to deliver the plan. We just drop down once more, and a few more risks in terms of where we get to. So again, have to emphasise, I suppose, that in this winter plans and winter services that we have currently got stood up, either need to sort of stand back down or be managed within the existing budget. There are some opportunities. Even accountants like to feel positive at the end of something, and there is some opportunity to consider whether they're, we'll look through our balance sheet, we'll look to some retrospective VAT recovery programmes, and there are some opportunities around primary care and Microsoft. And we've also made a provision in our overall position. This is where it gets very exciting. For there's always a movement in the pension discount rate which comes through. This year it was positive, but we've only taken that non-recurrently. So if that was to happen again, there could potentially be a further benefit, but we won't know that until about December. We have included the potential to charge shared services. We transferred our laundry service to shared services, but we still own the building, and therefore the energy costs get charged to us. There is potential to charge that to them, although that may come back to us in higher charges. So I'm less optimistic on that point, but also it's important just to say there are some potential upsides within the plan as well. And if we just drop down again, that's it.
So we'll just finish this and then we can open up the discussion. The other thing that you have then in the suite of papers is the big document that describes all of the activities that we're undertaking, and then a series of appendices which are the templates for the delivery of the ministerial measures, which we can just do some highlights now. Yeah, then I'll hand over to you. So Chloe, do you want to move it on to the next one?
Do you want to move to the next slide, please? So in terms of primary care, we know there are a number of areas where we are focusing the strategic efforts of the primary care group. We've got the work around the GMS contract. We've got the aim of how we redesign our primary care support units. So that's the work that we do to provide support to general practices within CTM, where we have employed staff who go into support and provide additional capacity. There's the ongoing work about how we're submitting the working around the implementation of the new dental contract, which is a significant shift away from a traditional unit of dental activity model to one which is around population health, and working with the dental services across CTM. We've probably seen the biggest engagement in that, actually, compared to the rest of Wales around the adoption of that contract, but still provides some challenges. And then there's the maintaining the reform around contracts for the optometry services in the community. Next slide, please. We you know, a big focus, and we'll touch on this as well in the performance report, is around urgent and emergency care. And this is around how this year we transition to a model that is very much driven through ambulatory care, through our same-day emergency care services. We've got, as I've discussed at previous boards, we've got a myriad of ways in how we deliver that, so we don't have a consistent CTM, one CTM model. And part of the work that's been going on with the Unscheduled Care Group has been to develop that and moving next year into implementation. And again, it is then the next phase of the 6 Goals implementation, particularly around our backdoor challenges, the model of discharge, genuine discharge to recover and assess, and not to continue to have assessment within the hospital, which remains a significant challenge. But also building on the excellent work that's happened already this year around the navigation hub to reduce conveyance and attendance at hospital. We know that many of our needs met without an attendance at our emergency departments. It's how we work across mental health services, primary care services, and hospital services to support patients in their own home. Next slide, please. Next slide. A key focus for us as part of our targeted intervention and as part of our provision of better services is around moving towards the stopping any patients waiting over 4 hours to be offloaded off an ambulance, and this is very much a key focus for us. The Welsh Ambulance Service have written again today, raising concerns about their ability to respond nationally in Wales to delays of offloading ambulances across all the hospitals, and how we drive that. Key for us, as I'll touch on in the performance report, then is flow, but very much the focus of the Unscheduled Care Group is to move to a place where we do not hold ambulances for more than 4 hours on our forecourts, to allow them to be out responding to patients in the community. Next slide. And again, it's a real focus on how we ensure that we see our patients in a more timely way within our hospitals. So we know at the moment that we are one of the poorer performers in Wales on performance in terms of seeing, assessing and discharging, or moving to a bed. And again, it is about trying to increase the performance of that for the benefit of our population through a number of those initiatives. Next slide, please. If we move into planned care, and clearly, we've touched on the level of investment. We know that we probably have one of the biggest backlogs of patients in Wales, despite the efforts that everyone has been making to bring those down. And the aspiration for 23-24 is that we'd have nobody waiting over a year for a first outpatient appointment and nobody waiting over 2 years by the end of March for treatment, in totality of their pathway. Through the modelling that we've done and the developments we're looking at around community dermatology services and community ENT services, in addition to that, and as you approved through the consent agenda, the regional ophthalmology business case, all of those things are really important ways in which how we create additional capacity and make the benefit of regional working to address some of those patients who are experiencing the longest waits. So very much using the additional investment. So we've got 26.1 million from Welsh Government, of which a proportion is for regional, 18 is for our own direct utilisation. We've invested an additional 5.5 million then, as Sally's described, in order to bring those waiting times down and to ensure our patients are receiving the same access as patients elsewhere in Wales. So very much an important part.
Yes, and I should actually be really clear with the board that at these plans, and there's some numbers that come up on the next slides, assume full cool down of the money that was topsized for regional activity. So we've already built that into our recovery assumptions.
And next slide, please. So what we've tried to do here is to understand a little bit around the scenarios of the additional investment. This was around the 6 million, as board will be aware. We made a decision to change that slightly, but the numbers I think will still be able to be delivered. This is very important. This is around those patients who are waiting the very longest. So these are patients who are waiting over 156 weeks. And our aim was to try and look at how we could eradicate those waiters by the end of June. As you'll see from those numbers, that isn't going to be possible, but the commitment we've made is to eradicate all of those longest waiters by the end of August. And so that we can move those down. Go to the next slide. And this is where I think the scale of the additional investment really shows through. So at the moment, you know, at the end of February, we had around 25,000 patients waiting over 2 years. With the additional investment at the moment, that is modelling through at 700 patients. That is a number of patients that we feel confident in terms of how we can get treated and manage through the process. But you know, that's a significant change to what patients are experiencing at the moment. If you go to the next slide, and again, we looked at how could we achieve down to a 78-week target. That's the target that's been used in England, which is a year and a half. And again, you know, we've got 43,000 patients in that position at this moment in time. With the additional investment we've approved as part of that, or we hope to approve through that IMTP process, that will be at about 2,500, which is again a significant reduction in the volume of patients who will be continuing. Next slide. And then the really important one is those patients who are waiting over a year for a first outpatient appointment, which is an intolerable position for any of those. And again, we see a massive reduction in those. There are some changes to the way in which the ophthalmology model will run, which we need to reflect in these figures. So again, we are confident that we'll be able to bring ophthalmology down within the 52-week tolerance for those, and the same for restorative dentistry. So again, you know, very clear that this will allow us to meet those national expectations for both 2 years wait of treatment and for 52 weeks first patient appointment. But clearly in a number of specialties, that number will be lower. You know, so I think it is important. That's a maximum wait that we'll be seeing in some of our most challenged specialties, and they're the most challenged specialties both within Wales and across the UK. But very much we would be expecting to see you know, a 78-week performance for a number of our specialties within the health board. Fine. 33 then, please. So again, a big focus of this is radiological investment and improvement and bringing down to a maximum 10-day wait for USCs. We're achieving that now for MRI and CT. We're at 13 days for ultrasound, and again we'll be bringing those all in within that time frame as part of the cancer performance plans. One of the exciting challenges is the redevelopment of the radiological unit at Prince Charles Hospital as part of the ground and first floor works, and building that. And hopefully that within the latter half of this year, we'll be able to realise some additional capacity as part of the Llantryston Health Park development, which will again help us address some of our longest waiters. Within the planned care recovery, there is money set aside for ultrasound, which, as you'll know from the performance, is a significant challenge for us, and will allow us to eradicate our backlog of ultrasound patients. So again, bringing our radiology services back in line with the 8-week target. Next slide, please. And mental health LD. So again, you know, very clear focus on bringing performance up to the ministerial standards across all our mental health services. We've got some exciting developments around workforce redesign, utilisation of online support for assessments. Andrew Davis has been leading a really, around the use of differing tiers within psychology services so that we can provide more timely access. And the other really important development for this coming year in mental health is 111+2. So this will be a single number for any mental health crisis, and will be provided by us. We are on track to go live with that from the end of April, in line with that expectation. So really exciting development, and will allow us to signpost and work with our independent sector partners in a different way around redirecting patients. Next slide.
I'll just pick this one up.
Yeah.
Because I think the main thing in here, obviously there's a gynae recovery, which is part of plan care recovery. There's also the newer developmental service where we're all very concerned about the backlog for assessment and treatment. There is investment in the plan care recovery fund in working through that backlog and reducing the wait times, but at the same time we're doing some strategic work to understand demands, differentiation of demand, and how services might be differently developed, so that we've got the right service to the right people. It's a bit one size fits all at the moment, so there's two aspects to that. We've then got some slides on people, how, and a couple on digital, so that.
So I guess just clicking onto the first slide, you'll be familiar with these 10 priorities, which I think have been before the board once previously. So these are now our 10 people priorities. There's a fairly broad range of them, ranging right away from wellbeing activities to leadership to workforce planning and data. So those cover all of our ambitions really in relation to our workforce over the life course of the IMTP and beyond. But I'd probably just draw your attention to, in particular, in relation to the IMTP and the financial discussion, is workforce planning. So you'll note that we have made the decision to invest £1.5 million in overseas recruitment, which is less than we had originally talked about. However, balances the risk across all of the different areas that we've discussed this morning. We do have a plan that sits alongside that as well, just to give board members some assurance about the broader plan. And that really involves looking at our education commissioning process differently. So we've put in double the numbers in terms of education commissioning for nursing that we have in previous years. And we've got a discussion with HIW coming up very soon to talk to them about that and about training capacity more generally. We're also looking at development of new roles, and in particular we are watching with interest a piece of work that's been done at government level on the establishment potentially of a registered band 4 role, which I think due to conclude in October, and should we get the nod, as it were, to press ahead with that role, I think we'll spend the next couple of months putting ourselves in a position where we are very well prepared to take advantage of what that role may give to us. So for those who aren't aware, that's a role that's been established in England now for a number of years. There are 8,500 of them in NHS England, and it does offer us significant opportunity to try and rebalance our nursing workforce. And also, we are, of course, looking at efficiency and new roles and different ways of working beyond that. So the overseas nursing, of course, is not the answer to everything. Another significant focus for us over the next couple of years will be retention. So alongside our plans to recruit, we also know that we have 12–13% turnover in nursing at the moment. So we have to give our staff as good an experience as we possibly can from a wellbeing perspective, from a development perspective, all of those different things, and indeed their experience of leaders and managers within the health board. So all of the plan kind of links together around those priorities. And that's probably all I wanted to touch on. And Linda, if that's okay, we could probably skip on to the digital.
Yeah, skip on to digital. So 41, please go.
Thanks, Linda. Colleagues will be very familiar now with our strategic themes, which are on the left-hand side, and some of the underlying themes. And through our digital data committee, a report report later on the agenda today. Perhaps two of our biggest escalations, or one of our biggest escalations rather, has been really around our capacity. So really welcome this plan that we've been able to actually allocate some of the funding to address some of those most critical risks, and certainly around some of our legislative requirements, which I know board members have been concerned about in terms of IEG, cyber, etc. Next slide, please. I think, notwithstanding all of that, we do understand, we've got a strong ambition as a health board, but the expectations of our staff and our communities is only going to increase when it comes to digital. So we know that while we've got some money available this year and we will invest that, we're going to need to think about in future plans and future years how we increase that and tip that balance, and working with finance colleagues and Sally, thinking about our estate's utilisation as well. Those are the opportunities we really need to drive out, as well as key programmes of work, which I'll come on to in the next slide, please, Chloe. So some of the things that we are taking forward in 23-24, get it like Sally as well. Some of our core systems, actually, I think we've done a significant infrastructure review across our whole estate, which has identified a really quite detailed and significant plan around improvements. We know that we've got quite a lot of legacy infrastructure that we need to address. National systems, I've just listed 3 there, but actually we've got 10 national programmes in play at the moment. Clearly the Welsh Nursing Care Record, which is a real success story at the moment, is completion in Princess of Wales. We'll have all acute sites and all minor injury sites now using the Welsh Nursing Care Record, and the first health boards to do that. Community care system, which I know is well documented, we are committed to delivering that for mental health in 23-24. Critical care system is one that's still going to cause a level of debate. I think it's fair to say there is a national procurement. We've actually got a really good existing solution, so we need to make sure we leverage the right functionality and meet for our health board versus the national product, which is going through a bit of a strategic review at the moment. And notwithstanding that, those core programmes of work around re-prescribing, link and risk, which are significant pieces of work on their own, will continue to run in 23-24. I guess the last 2 bits I'd like to just pull out on here in terms of the whiteboard work, and I know some colleagues have already been to see that across some of our acute sites. I think it's fair to say that's really landed well in terms of some of our ongoing work across the health board, actually, but it's really exciting. I think that gives us more opportunity in the future to look at how we develop that product further to meet more of our needs, not just where we started with it. And clearly one of the big opportunities is around the patient-centred contact programme of work and how we start to digitise extremely manual processes at the moment. So next slide, please, Chloe. So this was the gap that we talked about. Obviously, some of this gap now does get addressed by some of the money we are now able to allocate, certainly around compliance areas. We are going to put some money towards getting people out and visible across the health board far more than just the press. I've got to say, to be fair to the teams, they've done a significant improvement programme around our day-to-day support, but actually this is about being much more accessible and much more visible right across our health board. It would be remiss me not to mention we have had increased service costs from our SLA with Digital Health and Care Wales, and we're working through some of that. And I think the last bit is things will crop up in the year. It's inevitable, certainly within a digital sense. We know the NHS Wales app is due to go into a much more public phase in 23-24. That will inevitably, I feel, increase the requirement on what expectation our communities and our public, certainly those who are using that, will have. And I think I thought.
Thanks, Stuart. And maybe just finally, we haven't had time to write anything around the investment in stroke, but it'd be quite helpful, I think, if Lauren just said what the high level thoughts are about where that money would go to.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So colleagues from Quality and Safety Committee and PPF actually will be well cited to the challenges that we're experiencing across our stroke services. There's been significant work done to map out what our perceived gaps are and to rank really what our opportunities are for investment in terms of the impacts that they will have across stroke services. So The plan will be to invest in our early supported discharge team, so growing our registered and non-registered workforce within that team. So we've got equity across the CTM footprint, and the evidence shows that that will support patient outcomes, but also will help us in terms of flow, which will have a knock-on effect on the wider acute system and the stroke pathway overall. So great news. I know a lot of people will be pleased to hear that we've got some investment in stroke services proposed. Clearly, there's more that we need to do, but I think this investment potentially for 23-24 will help us on that journey towards a SNAP A rating, which is our ambition.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, so just to sort of wrap up, I suppose. I mean, first thing I think is need to acknowledge is that not being an easy process to go through. And I just want to say, you know, first of all, thank you to all the team, because I think this has taken a lot of iterations going round and round and round, lots and lots of loops. And to be fair, in an environment where things are moving all the time, both within the organisation and out with, as Sally was explaining about, you know, movements in numbers from one day to another. And so I just want to acknowledge that, you know, the team have really worked hard to try and get something for everybody in all of this, because, you know, it's so difficult in an era where we're looking at such big numbers to try and, you know, continue to put money into things when we know that our position is in a really challenging place. So I think first of all, just to acknowledge that, and also I think to Linda and actually Elle in Linda's team, who's worked hours and hours and hours to try and bring this to a fruition in a really challenging environment. So I think just first of all that, you know, I can recognise the contribution that everyone has made. Just a couple of things from me, I suppose, is the point that Sally made about the efficiencies and savings. I think, you know, I think we need to think perhaps as a board how we're going to oversee that programme moving forward, because I know we do see it through the finance report and the PPF and things, but I just wonder, I think we've talked as execs about how we get better at tracking and keeping tabs of some of those big ticket transformation projects, but I think it's probably, given the risks financially that sit alongside this plan around savings, I think we might want to give some thought, perhaps with the relevant committee members, to how we best put the assurance and scrutiny of those savings plans in, so that we keep that. Bear in mind that the clock starts ticking with savings from Saturday, and you know, we haven't got 3 months to really scope them out. We've got to start now. But I would say that also, going back to Stu's point, the digital opportunities to feed into that are huge. I mean, just to give you a little case study, Stu and I had a chat this week about this. I only learned this week that we have, on the patient administration side, on bands 2 to 4, we have approximately 700 people in this organisation employed on bands 2 to 4, shuffling bits of paper around, getting people into appointments, and that has to be an opportunity, A, to improve the service we provide to our patients, and also to improve the efficiency of the way we run our organisation, and the digital opportunities that underpin that are just enormous. So I think when we're talking about the efficiencies, leading on to the next point, the messaging around all of this is going to be really important as well, because this organisation's had a long history of many, many years prior to me being here of perhaps a perception that sometimes quality was compromised to deliver financial efficiency. We've got to be really, really careful we don't. The perception isn't that we've lurched back to that era, and I'm already a little bit worried because I've picked up a little bit round and about the place, people starting to narrate some of that. So I think Simon and Sally and Linda and Gethin and others, there's something about how we craft a story here about what we're doing to improve the quality, to improve the efficiency of the way we run the organisation, but then also we do need to make sure we are working towards delivering financial efficiency in the longer term. And that leads me to my final point, which is we obviously talked about this year's plan, but the stark reality, when you're looking at scale of deficit, that will not get recovered in 1 year. And what it really leads us into is the wider strategy conversation about how do we design a health service, a health system in the CTA footprint that is going to see us deliver improved outcomes for our population, but also that the clinical service model is fit for the future in terms of you know, the organisational, the way it's configured, which services are delivered where, because the stark reality is part of the underlying problem as an organisation we have financially is trying to run lots of things in lots of different sites on that in an era where workforce is one of our biggest pressure points. And that is a fundamental challenge for us as an organisation. We are going to have to get into some quite, you know, tough conversations, frankly, about how we see those service models being delivered going forward. But equally, we've got some fantastic opportunities with the Treasurers and Health Park, the work we're doing regionally with our colleagues in Cardiff and AB. There are some really positive things. So a lot of this is going to be how we position it with our communities, with our stakeholders, with our staff, to help them understand this is about transforming the way healthcare is delivered in this patch for the better outcomes for our community. So really, really positive, I think, to see where we've got to. It's not, you know, clearly it's not a position that we are pleased to be in, but I think it gives us a catalyst, I think, to really start to think differently about how we deliver services in the future.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. I invite members to raise any questions or comments should they wish. Linda?
Yes, thank you very much, Emrys. So sorry not to be with you all today. I'm just on holidays this week in France, so it wasn't possible, but thanks for letting me join remotely. A lot of what I was going to say really does echo some of the things that Paul said as well. I wanted to say it's obvious to me as a board member that a huge amount of work have gone into the development of this plan and the budget, and I want to say thank you to the teams for that. Also, really good to see some exciting new things in the pipeline as well, amongst everything else that needs to be done. And following the recent meetings that we've had around digital, it's especially good to see the digital developments, which, you know, Stuart rightly said that we've been concerned about. I had a couple of points on those. One was, are we really sure that we've got the training in place? You know, when Paul and I did a walkabout in Bridgend a couple of weeks ago, it was really great to see the whiteboards in place, but there was still a concern about staff perhaps not getting the right training. And also, I just had a question for you, Stuart, about the, you know, the number of people that you've got leaving the team. The job isn't done yet. Are you sure you've got the right number of people for the future? And then accepting that we have no option but to accept the budget as it stands, and I recognise all the work that's gone into it. Again, just a little piece about what Paul was just saying about is what happens to next year's savings target. I really agree that we should have some oversight on that and not just be in situations at Christmas where we're not really sure about what's happening. And I guess there's a question about what happens if we can't meet the savings target, which sort of led me to the comment that you just made, Paul, about the business model and whether or not it's sustainable. And just to say that I think as a board member, I would really welcome a conversation about the sustainability of the model and some of the specifics that we might need to take and the difficult things that you're talking about sort of in the near future. So sorry, it's quite a lot in there, but thanks for letting me say that.
Stuart to respond to that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Linda. I really appreciate your comments. And in terms of the structure then, so as board members will be aware, we're doing a strategic leadership restructure at the moment. That will set our foundation, that will give us a platform. In terms of the numbers that you've referred to, we are going to be able to retain some of those, not all of them. We you know, the honest answer is we need more resource. We are actually managing though within an additional 2 million, as Sally alluded to. There was already 1 million in the plan, so we are able to retain a number of those people, but we're going to have to address these compliance issues, as you know, in terms of our just general provision for information governance and cybersecurity, and also around our ICO action plan, which we reviewed at the last digital data committee. So those are pressing things which we're going to need to divert resources to resolve.
Thank you. Stuart, do you want to cover Patsy?
I just had a couple of questions. One on the recurrency of the funding, which Sally's already answered, and secondly to say how pleased I am to see the investment in stroke. I know it won't take us all the way, it won't address all 4 indicators, but it will take us a long way. And given our demographic of this population and the cost, the long-term cost of treating patients who have been affected by stroke, it's money well spent in my view. So I just wanted to say how pleased I was to see that.
Thank you for that, Patsy. I know that Sally might want to come back on that one.
And not on that one, it was something Paul said earlier, and obviously see how much work is on into the plan, and it is about, I too am worried about how message is coming across with clinical staff about money over quality, it's how we frame it to our clinical population as about quality, efficiency and safety, rather than money, because if we get those right, the money will follow, and I think it's really important to frame it in that way rather than, you know, sort of government statements, which I know we do.
No. Well, I think now after today, and we get the position agreed, I think, Simon, there's a pretty urgent need for us to pull something together that actually describes what the plan, and actually quite a simple way, and actually that explains where we're putting the money in, because, you know, there's a worry that people think that we're not putting any money into anything. Actually, we're putting quite a lot of money into a lot of things. All this additional activity we're doing in planned care, that's all about more capacity coming in. Stroke example, the digital investments we're making. So we can't say that there's no money, you know, it's about money over quality. It's absolutely not. The challenge is always, as we all know, that one particular team that had their idea they needed a specialist nurse for this, that gets turned down because it doesn't fit the wider, that then becomes, oh, I see, it's about. So I think, Simon, we perhaps need to do a bit of work, and I think involving Greg, Sally and Dom, Lauren, about clinically describing. So I personally, if we're going to do a little video for staff about this, I'd much rather it was Greg and Dom and Lauren describing what we're doing than being up Sally and Linda being asked to. I would. But I think it's about trying to explain to people that actually this is a collective owned problem. This is not Sally's finance issue and Linda's planning issue to deal with. This is the organisational balancing and actually describing some of those tensions and challenges we've had to go through. Because I think that's really, people don't see all of this stuff that's gone on behind the scenes and the deliberations that have gone into place. I don't know how.
Sorry, I've got a couple of things. I've got quite a few people here at the moment. Can I just ask, let's say Gethin? I know Ian's there already waiting. So if I go Gethin, Howell, Ian, and then Carolyn, if that's okay. So Gethin.
No, and I think that, you know, the important bit we've got to acknowledge here is that we've ended up over the last few years putting sticking plaster solutions over a whole raft of issues that actually cost more, and we don't necessarily get the quality. And you know, if I give you the example of the conversation we're having with Alex Brown, who's the medical director for unscheduled care, about actually going back and completely rebasing the junior doctor model, because we're employing locums at exceptionally high agency rates, where we know we've got those doctors. So actually this is a way in which we can have the right number of doctors to provide the right quality of care on the wards, with actually less cost. And that's the conversation that we're getting into with all of the different care groups. So we've got to make it very much about putting right some of the sticking plasters we've done that are costing us money and we're getting poor quality for. So it is that debate. And I think the care group leaderships are owning that, and it's how we use them as well as part of the, Dom, Greg, Lauren doing some of that presentation. Actually, that the leads of the care groups should be part of that.
If I go invite Howell then, please. Sorry, it's just going to be a similar point I get. So, we often talk in healthcare about balancing quality, money, and equity activity with sort of balance people. I think I would kind of add that as a fourth, if I may, for that, make it a square instead of a triangle. And I don't mean that in a resource sense either. I mean in a human sense. So we've got 30,000 people who've had a really difficult couple of years, and I think this plan balances our people and it invests in our people alongside actions that will make a real difference from a quality and a safety perspective, which itself will have a positive impact on our people. We've talked about some of the moral injury stuff that's happened in healthcare over the last few years with growing harms and waiting lists, etc. I think some of the decisions that we've made to arrive in the plan that we have actually take account of those things, and it's how we then play that back, as we've said, to the organisation and why we've made those decisions and those investments. And I think that's really important to frame it in that way.
Thank you, Howell. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Emrys. Loads of questions I could ask, but I'll resist doing the digital ones because that's coming up later as well. But as people have said already, I'm really glad to see the investment in stroke services. That's something I think lots of us have been asking questions about for quite some time now. So really glad to see that go forward. So I'll be sort of keen on following that through as time goes on. We've got a couple of questions, so I won't belabor that any longer. First one is on finance for Sally. And on one of the tables you showed, Sally, it was showing the probability of financial risk, and it got around 50%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where does that, excuse me, where does that calculation come from? Is there sort of some science behind that, or is there a guesstimate, or how does that come about?
It's an estimate / guesstimate.
Yeah.
It will be, won't it? Because we're trying to foresee a whole range of risks.
Yeah.
So if I was at my most, so I used to have a deputy who was incredibly pessimistic and would put everything at 100%, and that used to give really, really quite scary numbers every year. So it's an attempt to try and moderate and overall come with a global, what might the risk estimate look like? Because not everything will happen. So at this point, that's where it sits. However, within that, I probably, at my more pessimistic moments, increase the risk over some of those things. So the risk of not delivering the savings at this point, 50% probably feels a bit light. So that's probably, you know, as ever, some things have to be estimates.
So you get feedback presumably and adjust those as time goes on.
As we go down through, you expect to mitigate and sort of erode your residual risks down, so that by the time you get to about this time of the year, you're a bit more certain. Although you can never be quite certain, even in the final month of the year, what might roll through.
Okay, thanks. And the other one was to Howell, and that was retention. And this is related to overseas nursing. Because I think we talked about this a while ago, that there's a possible perception that if overseas nurses couldn't get involved in the culture, if so to speak, they might feel very isolated. What is our actual retention in terms of overseas recruitment compared to home recruitment, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good question, and I'm going to avoid it slightly only because we have a 2-year retainer for overseas nurses. So I can quote a figure of 96% due, but because that's how many are still here, which is great. But that's because most of them haven't yet ticked through their 2-year retainer period. So that would be slightly disingenuous to give you that figure. I think we need to wait a little bit. Generally speaking, the ones who've come here have been of a high quality, they've passed their OSCEs, and we have retained them very well. We probably need to see how the next year or so goes, and we will have a better indication of where we're at, because our first chunky cohort was in the financial year 2021, and most of them landed towards the end of 2021. So we're just coming up to that time now where we'll have a better sense of that. Feedback, however, is good. There are some learning points, so it's quite resource intensive for board managers, senior nurses, in terms of developing the competencies and making sure that these nurses are safe and in the numbers. So we've invested in practice development nurses as part of the bid for the 1.5 million to support with that. But I think a lot of it remains to be seen. We will inevitably, though, have an element of turnover, because we know that some people use it as a bit of a means to get into the country, for example. Some go on to work elsewhere, some go on to work in different countries. One of the things we have, however, done, which is encouraging people, I think, to stay longer, is invest in the visa element. So we know that that's a particular attraction for people, that we support their visa over an extended period. But generally speaking, our experience has been very positive, I think.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Kevin in then? Sorry, Kevin.
Just very quickly on that.
Yeah, sure.
I understand the whole importance, imperative on the recruitment of nurses. What are we doing enough to encourage young Welsh boys and girls to want to be nurses?
So that's again really good question. So why are we recruiting from overseas? We're doing that because we've got a historical supply issue. So we're a couple of years behind. As I mentioned, the commissioning numbers that we put in this year take us from about 350 a year historically to just over 700, so just over double. However, we know that fewer people are choosing nursing as a career. It's been quite the media attention around nursing over the last year or two has been quite tricky. And we also know that a number of people now are starting their nursing qualifications and are jumping off, or are concluding their nursing qualifications and leaving the profession within their first 2 to 3 years. So we as a system have got an awful lot to do to think about why that is. Part of it is about the pressure, so it's a vicious cycle in some ways. Fewer staff means higher levels of burnout, higher levels of pressure. So we've got to think about the whole gamut. So we need to think about how we encourage people into the profession, how we support students, training capacity, because the Welsh University training capacity for nursing is at capacity. So us now doubling our numbers is going to have an implication. So what do we do about that? And also we then, when people start and they come into us as newly qualified nurses, how do we support them and give them opportunities to grow and learn with us? That is the reason why we've asked for a meeting with HEIW to discuss some of those things, and they are also included in the social care and health strategy for NHS Wales and social care, and also the National Workforce Implementation Plan. So we will need some support from government, HEIW and others to do that, but there's an awful lot we can do locally as well.
Just on that, I mean, I had a meeting yesterday with the Future Generations Commissioner, the new Future Generations Commission. He was talking about the new commissioner saying he wants to do some practical things that really show the impact of the Future Generations Act in Wales. And I raised the point about workforce and saying our biggest challenge is workforce. So what can he be doing to support us in going out, as you're saying, into our communities, raising the profile of jobs in care generally, whether it's nursing or social care, whatever, and also recognising that the socio-economic benefit of having people, young people in our communities going into well-paid jobs has a long-term benefit on their own health and well-being and our public health outcomes and things. So I think it's a bit of work to do that. And also I had a meeting last week with the University of South Wales, who are really, really keen to develop and build on the really good relationships we have already with them, but to think about creative routes into degrees. So picking up people perhaps who wouldn't actually think about going to university, but helping them through a different route, which may be more like an apprenticeship route into nursing. And so I think we've got some really good relationships locally. So Hal's described this, there's a national agenda to be led, but I think there's a lot we can do also locally with our connections in with local colleges and education providers to try and help that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. The pathways, sorry, I sort of missed that bit. There's a huge opportunity there, and I think you'll see probably over the next 5, 10, 15 years that becomes slightly more radical. They are exploring medical apprenticeships in England. UK tends to be a little bit snooty about those types of routes into professional life, but I think that will become more and more prevalent over the next few years. So we've got massive opportunity there, particularly with our local community.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Paul. I'll invite Carolyn in now, and then I'll invite Millie, and then I'll close this agenda item down there. Okay, so Carolyn first, and my apologies, your hand's been up for a while, Carol.
That leads me very nicely into my point, which is I think something that doesn't come across in our plan is the role of education and research. And obviously all of these discussions are happening, and our links with academic colleagues, HEIW are there, but it doesn't come across in the plan. And specifically, I think there's very little in there about research. And actually, we had a really positive research presentation, didn't we, at a development board? And I don't think we've captured that in the plan. And I know that people have worked flat out for many hours on this, so I don't mean to criticise at all. But I do think that is a very positive thing, and it's research and education and innovation which will help us to change these models and are critical to what we do. But I don't think that necessarily comes across. So I think that could be enhanced a bit to just show that we are exploring all of that. And in our role as a university health board, we are actually utilising that to the full, really.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Can I respond?
Quite well made, Linda.
Yeah, well, to say, I think that's a fair comment, and I think we will seek to drop something in before it goes in tomorrow to reflect that, and give people the opportunities to see that that's what we've done. So,
Thank you, Carolyn. Linda. Mel.
Thanks, I just wrote this one. Our biggest challenge is our workforce. And I don't know if you're aware, but I'm going to talk about some of the soft stuff now. And something I spoke with Hubble just before the meeting started. One of the best nights I've had while I've been on this health board in the last 7 years is when I attended a staff recognition event. We used to do them every year, and they were brilliant. Now, it's in soft stuff. We're talking about retention, we're talking about morale, we're talking about influence in the way this board operates. Who's going to send a message for us? Nothing sends a message more than, how we recognise the staff. Time and time again, with a good example today, some brilliant work is going on. We go on walkabouts, we see brilliant work for us, we see brilliant individuals all tell us how much they think it's great to work for this health board. And the last recognition event we had was in 2019. And again, I see nothing about recognition. That word recognition is not anywhere in the MTB. Not that I want it to be, because I don't think we should say it. We should live and breathe it. What I'm going to say is nothing created a little bit of a fire under people is when they think they can nominate their colleagues.
Yeah.
You know, I had a conversation about one of our staff, really under the radar on this health club of ours, but it's going up to a garden party in Buckingham Palace on I think it's the 9th of May, right? Nobody would ever know, but we need to start doing things like that.
Simon, I think.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree, Mel. It's a huge gap in this organisation, that lack of staff recognition and reward. So in the next couple of weeks, we will be launching the first element of our staff R&R scheme, which will start with peer-to-peer recognition. So allowing staff are out there witnessing these little acts which are making a massive difference to colleagues, to the service, and to patients, and to the public. So they can recognise that, and they can share that with people, share that with the individuals doing the act, share it with us as a board, and share it with the senior team we've got, so we can then recognise that at a corporate level as well, because it is a really big gap.
It's powerful stuff, Stu, and
it is.
And I would want every one of our members of staff, from support to everybody, to be an ambassador for this organisation, for the health service in general. But until we start recognising people, right, it ain't gonna happen.
No, you're absolutely right. And what we're going to do with this peer-to-peer stuff is that, as I say, that becomes the base of our reward and recognition pyramid, really, the top of which at some point will be, I'll stick my neck on the line here, will be an annual event where we're able to come together as an organisation. We'll do it efficiently, Sally, and recognise these incredible things that are happening across the organisation every day. Our speakers today, the story they told, the difference they are making to individuals. So that's happening 850 times last year as well. So we need a way of recognising that. And as you say, Mel, making people feel proud to go home into the communities, into the supermarket, and say, I work for Kentucky Organic, and be proud of that, because that again plays into the kind of recruitment and retention piece as well, doesn't it?
And if I may, because in this organisation particularly, right, we employ probably more than any other organisation, all our staff and everybody who works in this organisation lives in our community. And this is one where community can feel proud. And I know I say we should, this is one of these musts.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to endorse this plan, we need to do something that really gives it, starts a fire going. And that's the truth of the matter.
Can I just say, well, thank you for that, Mel, and thank you for your response there, Simon, and the positive way forward on that issue. I want to close this item down now, but more importantly, closing this item down, there was a number of sort of key things that came out from there for me. Is one that we got some major challenges ahead as a health board for the next year, as the whole of the NHS does, and I think that's to be respected. The importance of, we've had several discussions here about integrated governance, is that whatever decisions we make going forward, we've got to always consider, and I think it was raised by Sally and a few others around finance, quality, activity, workforce. Those have got to be out, and that needs to be. I know we're looking at a way of scrutinising any or assuring any decisions we make going forward, but we need to have that as part of our process. Sustainability of services is another one. I'm picking up on Patsy's point around, we've got great needs in our community, so we've got to deliver the best that we can possibly can within our IMTP. And picking up the last point there about research and governance, we need to ensure that's included. As Linda said, she can put that into the IMTP. And I think just to note, from a sustainability perspective, I think it was Linda's comment, is that as the year goes on, we need to, we've got to keep on top of what we can do with this year, year two, and as a board that we have the right processes in place to ensure that is happening. But can I just say big thank you to all, Paul and all the execs for presenting that overview today. There's a lot of work gone into that IMT by all departments and people, but we've got something, we've got a baseline to work on in going forward. Okay, can I just say then, I'd like to ask the board happy to approve the recommendations contained within the report with the added part of the research and innovation going into the development going into the report. That's okay. Thank you. I'm also conscious that I've gone a little bit longer than I should have on the board, but it's an important, there's been an important matter to show because it's the key driving document for us as an organisation. So can I say that we'll pause for a break now, comfort break now for 10 minutes, back at or 8 minutes, is that okay? Back by 12 o'clock. That's okay with colleagues. And if I could just ask Chloe if she could turn the volume off and put a screen on the saver on top of the film, and we'll be back at 12 o'clock. Thank you. Emma, can you check with you? I know you've got to take the,
We're off mute, so as soon as you're ready, Chloe can start.
okay, Chloe, if you could count us in, that would be great, please.
There we go, you're live.
Welcome back, everybody. Could I now go on to item number 6, please, which is the integrated governance, performance and assurance. And on to 6.1, if I can invite Paul Mears, our Chief Executive, to highlight the main items of his report, which is for noting, please.
Thank you, Emrys. So I'm just, sorry, I'm just trying to no, I should be prepped for this. So the key items I just wanted to draw your attention to in the Chief Executive's report, obviously, was first of all just to highlight that we've had our first meeting in the new escalation status of the health board, and you'll know as board members that we're in escalation targeted intervention for maternity and neonatal services, and also more recently performance and waiting times. We've talked a lot in these board meetings around the maternity and neonatal work, and that work continues, and further improvements are being delivered. There's obviously a lot of work going on, particularly on the neonatal services, and a lot of work to make sure that the improvements that we've seen over the past couple of years in those services is sustained moving forward. So I think the trajectory looks very positive, and also we are part also of the national work on maternity and neonatal services now. So I think the oversight of those national structures will make sure there's the continued scrutiny and challenge on the maternity and neonatal services. Also on quality and governance, a lot of further work being done. Colleagues from Wales and HIW have recently been undertaking their field work linked to the review of our arrangements for quality governance across the organisation, and we will receive further report on that from HIW Nordic Wales, probably April, May time, I think, in terms of their feedback on that. So we will further wait their response. And then on the quality related, on the performance related issue around waiting times, Gethin's already described much of the work that we're doing, particularly linked to investment we're proposing to put into some of our specialties to improve our waiting time performance, but we are also working on agreeing those trajectories with our colleagues in Welsh Government, appreciating there's quite a degree of ministerial interest in our performance, particularly around waiting times, cancer, and also our ambulance waiting times and handovers. So a lot of work going on that. Further updates, further meetings planned with Welsh Government colleagues in the coming months to review where we are on those. Only other things I just wanted to highlight were, I think, just pick up the point about the really positive work that I think is going on now across the region in terms of our approach to working jointly with Cardiff and Vale and our Devon Health Board. Linda mentioned and Gethin mentioned the paper in the consent agenda on ophthalmology, which I think is a good example of how we are now starting to move to delivery models of looking at how we deliver services in a more joined up way between our three organisations. Further work on that is going to progress in orthopaedics, and there's also a lot of work going on around diagnostics and how we can work in a more joined up way. Pathology is very active, for example, at the moment, discussing how cellular pathology can be delivered as a joined up service across the three health boards, potentially from a shared location within our footprint. So really positive work there, I think, and I think there will be other areas we can probably think about moving forward on, and not necessarily just clinical service areas. I think there's a lot of opportunities for some of the support services, some of the work we've been doing around workforce, and how we regularly with his colleagues, from the workforce teams in AB and Cardiff. There's a lot of other things I think we can be starting to look at doing in a more joined up way, which may also help us with our sort of drive of efficiency and savings, and they can benefit to us trying to do some of these things once across the three organisations, rather than 3 times at the moment. Also, just wanted to flag the recent reports on mental health that have come back from HIW. You'll know and will have seen the feedback around the Aingerton Clinic and the discharge arrangements and about mental health. Just to assure the board, and I know that's been talked through in the various committees as well, but we had a very helpful briefing session as execs last week with the mental health team about some of the current pressures and service challenges within mental health, which was really positive. And I've suggested to Callie that we might want to run a similar session for the wider board. I think there's a lot of really positive things going on with mental health, and yes, there are some really big challenges, which I don't think we can shy away from, but I also think it's important we set that against some of the really positive developments that are being done within the service. For example, this morning on the perinatal mental health services, but also in the mainstream adult services, there's lots of really positive work going on. But also we need to acknowledge there are some big high profile cases that are currently in train with coroner that are probably going to bring some quite big external scrutiny over us again, and I just think it's really helpful to have some more contextual conversations with the mental health team as a wider board. So we'll get that scheduled in for the next couple of months. Finally, just to update on the Director of Corporate Governance, we've obviously made an appointment to that role. So Gareth Watts will be joining us later this year. Gareth joins us from the Welsh Parliament Senate, where he's been Head of Governance and Assurance. Will bring a great degree of experience and knowledge to that role, which is really positive for us. And we're currently just out on an expressions of interest to fill the Executive Director of Public Health role on an interim basis, which Sarah is currently taking on very kindly, but we will be looking to find somebody to do that on an interim basis, and we should hopefully get progress update on that next week. Finally, the developments, I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot of work going on. We're sitting here today in the hub here, but there is a lot of work gone on over the past 18 months to develop the facilities around this site. And of course, we've now got the BA buildings being developed on the horizon as well. And it really does create quite a hub of activity around the Royal Morgan site. So you've got the Hub Event Centre over there, which is where all the ET services now being centralised, the breast care service over the Snowdrop breast care unit, which is starting now to see patients, which is a really fantastic facility. And this building here, which has obviously the facility here for a board, but also upstairs for our innovation and improvement team, being located the value and health team. So I guess this is a really fantastic place, partly because it's geographic location in our footprint and it's quite a central place, but also the fact that we've got such a diverse range of things now being developed here for the benefit of our staff and patients in this part of the world. And just want to acknowledge that this facility is something we really want to make sure we capitalise on and use, not just for execs to be based here, but also that it's a facility where care groups and others can come together across our footprint and use this as a centre for getting together, working on the key agendas we're facing, and also linking up with our innovation improvement. So those are all the points, Chair, from my
I invite any members who'd like to make any comments or questions to all of this report. Jane?
Thank you. A couple of points. Firstly, on mental health, clearly the Quality and Safety Committee has been taking a close scrutiny in terms of mental health, and most recently in relation to the two UHB reports. And I really welcome the proposal that we actually spend some time together as a full board looking at that and looking at the improvement programme that's been initiated. So really welcome that. Also welcome the investment in estate here, which I'm interested both for regional and our purposes. I guess the question is looking at our wider estate, and I know that auditors will be bringing that issue up later. What are our plans really for that review of our wider estate and development of an estate strategy?
So you're absolutely right, Jane, and I think it links back to the previous conversation with our NTP about the costs associated with our estate. There's the sustainability agenda around our estate as well. And also the opportunities with digital to think about how actually, if we're really maximising the opportunities that digital presents, what's that going to mean in terms of the future configuration of our estate. We've got some, we've also got to think then about the service models that we want to see to underpin our estate. And I suppose my slight nervousness about just having a estate strategy is that it's a very sort of isolation. It's done in isolation of, well, this is the number of buildings we've got. We want to downscale it by 120%. Therefore, this is what we need to dispose of or reconfigure. I think one needs to follow the other. So I think the clinical services strategy, which I think we're starting to really flesh out now from a acute services side, will help articulate where we see the future model of service, look at what we see the future model of service looking up for the acute sites. That then enables us to design what the estate needs to look like for the acute sites. But then also we shouldn't forget we've got a plethora, and indeed when we had a presentation last week for mental health, there were sites on there that I wasn't even cited on, which are really substandard and not fit for purpose. So there is something also, as those services start to develop their plans around their service models, how does the estate underpin it? So I'm not saying we shouldn't have an estate strategy. Clearly, we do need a strategy of where we're going with our estate, but I think it needs to come on the back of the service strategies first, and also really, we should also be asking the question: what can be done digitally first, and then what does the building need to look like? Because I'm been around a while, and I'm nervous that if you just go out and ask the service, what would you like, we'll end up with huge, great, desires for big buildings that perhaps are not necessarily where we should be going, and frankly not what we can afford either, because set against the backdrop of an estate strategy also needs to be the capital planning and financing that sits behind it, because frankly there is no capital money. So anything we do has got to really be about downsizing our estate, rationalising our estate, and potentially realising some of that asset to plan back into the building and keep. So sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but it's a good one. Thank you.
Form follows function, that's the bottom line. Yeah. So any other? No, that's it. Okay, thanks to Paul for presenting the report, in concluding the item, the board resolves to note the report. If I could then go on to item 6.2, please, which is the board assurance framework. And I invite Callie Hamblin to present the board assurance framework update report, which was received by the executive leadership group on the 13th of March 2023, and is before the board for approval. Callie.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of points to pull out, so I'll take the report as read. This was worked on with executive colleagues throughout February and March, so your latest updates are in the document. Two other points to pull out. There is an internal audit underway on the board assurance framework. At the moment, we're hoping to conclude that now in the next couple of weeks and have a report to the April Audit and Risk Committee. And also just to say, we did reflect on the board effectiveness review into Betsy Cadwallader. When we're looking at the back and making sure any findings and learning from that, we built into our strategic risk and our mitigating action around there. So those are just the key points I want to pull out. If members have got any questions on any of this, I'll hand over to my executive colleagues as appropriate.
Invite board members to raise any questions or comments should they wish. Sorry, Patsy.
I'll just pick one of them, Callie, today. Risk number 9, sustaining our future. I'm pleased to see that under the controls there's a trial of electric vehicles, and I just wondered where that was and how effective that was, and if it had started, when it was happening. And if you can't answer that right now, it doesn't matter, but I would like to know a bit more about it. And the second point to that question is, given the importance of this environmental sustainability agenda going forward, where is it discussed in detail? Where is there? I know it comes together. It comes together at audit and risk because we'll get reports on it, but it's very sporadic. It comes to PPF, but again, it's not the focus of that meeting. So I just wonder where this is taken.
The environmental and sustainability.
Yeah.
I can hand over to Linda, but I think we also look at picking that up through the Population Health and Partnership Committee. And I've also met with Vicky Linda's deputy recently and making sure how we bring that sort of population health, sustainable environment through that forum and other forums. So that is something that we recognise that we need to increase visibility on about that Population Health and Partnership Committee. In terms of electrical vehicles, can we pick that up offline? That's exactly okay and feedback to that, unless colleagues have got any answers on that. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add on the sustainable environmental other than.
I think you've answered it.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments in respect of the board assurance framework? No, okay. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Sorry, I put my hand up as you looked there. It's just a comment really, and I don't know you do this. I know there's a lot of work going on, but when you look at the table, which is section 1 summary, on every one it says trajectory, no change as at March 2020. Every single one says no change. So I don't know, is there a presentation issue or is there really no change?
I think in terms of no change in terms of scoring, so perhaps we just need to define that.
Yeah, maybe that's.
Yeah, so no change in terms of the mitigation score hasn't changed.
Yes.
Obviously, we've updated the narrative.
That's
So I'll pull that out a bit more, just a bit more clarity on that.
Okay, thanks.
No, very good point though, thank you.
Well, there's one point of note here in relation to Paul's report. Is as a board, we need to endorse signing off the spinal services MOU with Chief Executive Board. Can I just confirm with colleagues that we're happy to tend to sign that off, please? Okay, thank you. If I could then go on to 6.3, which is the integrated performance dashboard, please. Before I invite executive colleagues to present this item, I just want to advise members that I will firstly ask Linda Prosser to lead this item. I will then invite in the other executive leads to present the operational quality and people and culture sections. May I ask that members hold their questions until the report has been presented in its entirety by the aforementioned executive leads, and to support members in navigating the page numbering for each section as we noted on the agenda in admin control for ease of reference. I now invite Linda Prosser to provide an introductory overview of the dashboard, please.
Thank you. So my introduction will reflect the nature of the report of itself. We haven't made any changes in this month, but we do have a date now in April for a board development session to discuss how we better develop this report to present less information but more intelligence, and to help guide us to we're not seeking to take anything out of the report that has to be in public domain, but a way of presenting it that helps us to determine the highest risks and the areas of the biggest focus, with the other bits behind. So it's not read kind of flat. It's tier, if you get my meaning. So Stuart and I, that was a royal we. Where is it? It is. Are working on how we present that to you so that we can start to develop that. Yeah. But I think I think it's probably best just to go straight into the
So I'll take the report as read and just draw a couple of key aspects and risks to the board's attention. So you will note that we have seen a continued reduction in cohorts of our longest waiters, and it is today we're anticipating to be below 7,000 patients waiting over 104 weeks RTT. I think, and it is important to note that in December we had 12,000. So we are seeing a significant reduction in the cohort of patients who've been waiting longest. That is still far too many patients waiting far too long. But our plans are beginning to address those. And again, with our 52-week reduction, again, focus on reducing those, and we have seen those reduced by about 7,000 since December, and we'll come down a little bit further now by the end of March. So key focus at the moment is about how do we increase our capacity, both in a sustainable way where we know we've got demand capacity gaps within services, and so and how else we can extend it on a non-recurrent basis to address with backlogs. So we have, through March and into April, we have secured an additional in-sourcing theatre team working at Princess of Wales, that's very much focused on our longest waiting gynecology patients and ENT patients. And that is working well. The challenge of managing patients across 2 PASs is particularly difficult, and has proven, a real challenge for the operational team. So we mustn't underestimate what looks really easy at a health board level of moving patients around when it comes to those practical things, particularly around the PAS. Very, very challenging. We've had some additional outsourcing to the independent sector in ophthalmology and dermatology, and we'll see the vast majority of our longest waiting patients in those specialties also treated by the end of this financial year. We continue to see really good utilisation of theatres at Prince Charles. I'm really pleased. We appointed a new theatre manager, coupled with then some investment in some additional insourcing capacity. We are running 7 theatres every day at Prince Charles, consistently with really good utilisation and a strident start time in force. So it is good to see more and more patients being treated because we're using our assets more effectively. So really, really positive developments there. And we've been working as well with our colleagues in Welsh Government with a real focus on endoscopy utilisation. Members of the board will be aware we are 6 endoscopy rooms short. So the National Endoscopy Programme modelling identifies that CTM is 6 rooms short of its capacity that it needs to really meet the waiting time targets. So we are having to use our existing estate as effectively as we can, and we have seen some really positive improvement in our endoscopy utilisation, and you'll note that actually the continued drop in the cohort of patients waiting over 8 weeks for endoscopy continues to reduce. And we've already touched on the ophthalmology business case. Just also pulling through the diagnostic PTL. We've discussed now how in the IMTP proposal we'll be real focus on addressing our non-obstetric ultrasound backlog. So these are GP requested ultrasound, and have clear plans to clear that backlog. And in terms of the therapy aspect, key focus on our weight management program, which is the vast majority of patients that are waiting over 14 weeks. So there's been some additional investment within the dietetic service and approach, but also how we work with WISE for some of the lower level patients, so that actually they're getting access to support through that process. So in terms of risk, I guess, is capacity, ongoing capacity. The changes to the pension rules have been really positive, and we have seen a number of our clinicians who previously said they weren't going to do any additional work now come forward to say that they wish to continue to provide additional capacity, which is great, and clearly continuing to source staff to run all the additional capacity in some of our key areas remains at risk, with also the focus on cancer service recovery as well. So if I jump then to cancer very briefly, so our cancer performance in January sat at 38.1% compliance with the SCP. That wasn't expected, as I've discussed here, and at PPF previously, as we clear our backlog of patients over 62 days, we will see our performance remain deflated against the trajectory. What is positive in February, we're at about 46% compliance, and we're sustaining that position at the moment, forecast for the end of March. So it is good that we've brought that back. Sitting alongside that, we are now at the lowest backlog number that we've been at since November 21. And we will probably finish March around 600 patients. So again, a real focus on bringing those closing down the pathways for those longest waiting patients. Key focus areas are in breast, and part of that is moving to a 5-day-a-week operation, and that will involve consolidation of the breast service here, both in terms of outpatients in the Snowdrop Centre, but also for theatre on the Royal Glamorgan side, because it's the site where we can do all the other radiological support to breast surgery. Lower GI and upper GI, which again is driven by endoscopy and the capacity. and I'll discuss, we've got a lot of effort on there. Urology is a very complex pathway, and we're doing some work with Cardiff to understand how they're managing the pathway in a different way. But in terms of, there are 6 steps to the diagnostic pathway in urology, and that creates a significant challenge. And then in gynecology, we have focused on the step up of the one-stop clinic here at the Royal Glam. We have had a number of long waiting patients transferred to us from Swansea Bay, and so we're looking at how we can step up the capacity here by another 3 sessions a week to accommodate Swansea Bay patients at Royal Glamorgan. Just in terms of the overall piece then, so our faster diagnostic, so the target should be getting people diagnosed within 28 days. We're sitting at 62% compliance with that, and our median time for a diagnosis of cancer at the moment is 21 days. So whilst we've got this tail and our percentage number is looking poor, I think it is really important to know that we are diagnosing patients in a majority of our patients in a timely way. What we need to do is get that consistently applied across all our tumour sites. If I then move to unscheduled care, the key challenge, as Paul's already alluded to, is ambulance handovers. We are sitting at around 60% compliance of handovers within 1 hour. Our target clearly is to get that up to a much higher percentage, and to also eradicate any ambulances waiting over 4 hours for handover. And that remains a key focus for the unscheduled care group. The key challenge to that, and also our 4-hour within the department performance, is all about flow. And as I talked at length at Q&S, one of the challenges we have, we had a very good debate at Q&S around the compromises we're having to make around managing patients within the hospital, having to board patients, having additional patients in our wards, and the impact that had both from an experience perspective, but also the ongoing risk. Is to keep our emergency departments flowing as much as we can, and ensuring that we're able to offload ambulances as promptly as we can. So that is our key risk in unscheduled care, is about flow. As you'll note in the report, and I think it's really important I pull out for board to really understand that level of risk. We are running with twice the delays for packages of care than the rest of Wales. So our biggest challenge is moving patients on, either from our acute beds or from our community beds. That, as we know from the discussions we've had around stroke, affects our stroke ability, because we can't move patients out of the rehab beds then to then create the capacity for our acute stroke. But there is also a lot of good work that's going on. So we've touched on the whiteboards. And they're now being used. We've been using it to drive the day of care audits, and that's been proven, really helpful to understand what our internal delays are, but also what our external delays are. We've established the navigation hub. We've also got a real focus now on red to green, which is where we understand if there's a patient who's red, there isn't anything actively happening to progress their diagnosis, treatment and discharge. And so using that as a way to understand what's going on with the clinical management of patients. I will also pick up, so there is an item in the pack around immediate release. As you know, we've had a real focus on the no decline of any red release request from the ambulance service. There is one red release request, sadly, that was declined. That has gone through a full RCA process. The RCA has identified that it was a communication error between the ED team and the site team, and not following the protocol that's in place. That has been picked up and addressed, and we continue to validate any red release decline. I will just share a story with board, if I may. So we have got a red decline reported for a week of the 13th of March. The protocol for that is that the ODU from the Welsh Ambulance Service, the Operation deployment unit will make a request for us to provide a red release, and they will identify the ambulance crew that they wish us to release because they worked out who they can. We complied with that, and we released that crew. Unfortunately, that crew had been split, so they were looking after 2 patients. And whether or not that had not been communicated through to ambulance control, but it left us in a position where we'd complied, the crew wasn't able to leave to respond, and so that's now reporting as a decline by us. And so, you know, it's great that we're now able to get into the level of understanding and what we can do to address that. So I think it is, you know, just important that the board understands the level of scrutiny and robust management that we're taking of that process, because that is clearly a significant. I'll just move then briefly to mental health. The key focus across our mental health services have been very much the backlog clearance. So like cancer, we've seen our performance against some of those key metrics reduce. What the data is absolutely assuring us is that the longest waiting patients are coming down, and that our level of treatments are significantly higher. So we will see that performance improve gradually now over the course of the next year, in line with the trajectories we've submitted as part of TI and into the IMTP, to improve the access compliance for our patients. I have to take any other questions.
Can I agree we're going to do the whole report before we do questions? And also I realised that because I'm used to doing it this way, I went straight to ops and I missed out quality and people. I know I have one job. So, but before we go back to those, I don't know if there's anything on diagnostics and therapies that you wanted to raise in particular, stroke or anything that you want to flag.
In terms of probably not additional to what we've talked about in detail in other committees. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Linda. Just a couple of things from me, and then Sally will talk through mortality. So 2 pleasing things to report. The first thing is an uptick in our complaints 30-day compliance. We dipped down to just shy of 35% back in December. Of course, the target is 75%. We've got a PTR improvement plan in place, and we're now back in the mid-50s, and we've sustained that position for this month. So that's really positive. We still have some patchy quality responses coming back from some services. We still have some work to do there. On the plus side, our 2-day acknowledgement of any concerns coming in is now consistently over 90%. It was down at 20. So the PTR improvement plan is working. We still have some work to do with the quality of responses. And as a balancing measure, we now measure reopened complaints, of which we have very few. So still some work to do there, but at least our compliance is increasing. So obviously that means the person that's complaining at the other end is getting a response a lot quicker. Whilst I'm talking about some good things, you will see in the pressure ulcer report that are collaborative in terms of our 50% reduction of grade 3 and grade 4 pressure ulcers from a community perspective. We've achieved through a lot of hard work through our district nursing teams, our community partners, and our TBN team. So that information is on page 14 of the report. You can see a nice run chart going in the right direction on the right hand side. We'll now challenge ourselves to a further reduction of grade 3 and grade 4 pressure ulcers going forward. And yesterday or the day before, agenda setting for Quality and Safety Committee in May, we'll be bringing together a spotlight report on pressure ulcers and falls in its entirety, in relation to inpatient pressure ulcers and inpatient falls. I'll be able to report back to the next board how we're progressing in that regard. One final thing from me, and that's in relation to the IP&C metrics. Again, they can be found on page 15 of the report. I'm particularly concerned around some of our gram-negative bacteremias, so our E. coli and our Klebsiella infections. We are in the pack across Wales. We want to be best, clearly. Half of the patients that are coming in from the community will have a Klebsiella or a E. coli infection in relation to the numbers that we collect. So we're trying to do some work now on identifying particular care homes where our teams can go out to report, to support catheter care, continence care, because it's definitely a growing level of anxiety across our communities that patients are coming in from some care homes with a urosepsis, which is obviously causing some challenges in that regard. So next part of work from an IPNC perspective is to focus on urosepsis within the community. I think that's it from my bit, and Sally's going to pick up on some of the mortality work.
So medication incidence and mortality rates, and you can see there that the third month running our prescribing errors have decreased, although it's too soon to say that's sustained, but it's still within normal variation, but pleasing to see a decrease. Administration errors remain within the natural variation. Pleased to say none of the medication incidents resulted in serious harm. Majority resulted in no harm. Mortality rates, there's always a peak in the winter months, and we saw that last month. There's a decrease in January, which is still above the annual average. However, we will wait and see if that continues to come down over the spring and summer months. Dom and I are actually doing a lot of work at the moment on how we record and analyse mortality rates and the data behind that. And we intend to collect more data to understand mortality rates better, and expect to present this in a slightly different way over the coming months, June onwards, I would imagine. So I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, Hal?
Thank you. Just a couple of things to mention in relation to people. So first of all, there's a broader and much more detailed metrics report which goes to the People and Culture Committee, which has a high degree of scrutiny at that committee. It's just a couple of tier 1 targets that make it into the overall for the health board, and they are around PDR and statutory mandatory training compliance, or core mandatory training compliance, and sickness levels. So just to say on PDR, while I think we're crawling towards making progress, I think my summary would be that the progress hasn't been fast enough. So we slipped down to around about 46% on PDR compliance around about the end of 2021, and we're now up to just under 60%. So that's good, but it's too slow. So we've got some work to do there. I think once we've got through the phase 2 of the structure discussion, we can then start to really ramp up the discussions around PDR compliance, because essentially what we're saying is half of our staff aren't having an annual conversation about their development and how they're doing. We have changed the process to make it much more accessible, and in fact that process has just recently been awarded a CIPD award. It's a good process. It focuses on well-being, development and objectives for the year linked to the CTM 2030 strategy. And we are also looking at a team PDR process. So if you're a busy ward manager with 100, 150 staff to do PDRs for, you can kind of understand in the circumstances we're in that this slips. So we're looking at doing PDRs in chunks of staff, which is something that we did in Cardiff and Vale when I was there, and it worked really well. You can do large numbers of staff at the same time, have conversations about what you intend to do together, and then if individual conversations are needed, do those separately. So we're piloting that in a couple of areas, and that will help us. I think as well what we're doing around pay progression, it's not the right kind of approach, but what we're doing on pay progression will have an impact, I think, on core stat and man training compliance. So you won't be able to pass through a pay progression window in future if you haven't completed your stat and man training, your core learning, which I think is appropriate, and in most other sectors that would be the case. So I think that will be a step change for us. And on stat and man more generally, then we are up towards again the 70% mark, which isn't where we'd like to be. We need to do that final push to get to 85%, but it is actually core learning week this week. So there are a number of events that are being pushed across the health board this week on social media channels. There are kind of how-to classes for people to come and see how they can access their ESR, and for us to bust some of the myths. Really, you can get to about 80% compliance with your stat demand just by logging in on your phone and doing them, or on a laptop. What people often do is they focus on the 20% they can't do, whereas if everybody did their 80%, we could then spend our time nailing the 20% that they might need to come to a classroom for. So that's an important message for us to get out. Sickness remains a challenge. It's come down in terms of the rolling rate from where we were during the pandemic, but you see from the graph on page 681 of the bundle, or 17 of the report, the orange line to the right-hand side, it's still fluctuating between 7 and 8%, with levels off at around 7.5% in terms of the cumulative rate, which is approximately 1.5% above where we were pre-pandemic. And pre-pandemic, we were one of the highest organisations in Wales, and Wales has higher sickness levels than anywhere else in the UK. So we have really still got a significant issue there. Some of the other things that we're doing contribute towards that. So some of the wellbeing offer that we've got, the work we're doing around workforce availability and workforce planning, and obviously leadership support as well. But we've got work to do there, which when you combine our sickness rate with our vacancy rate, if you look at nursing as one example, we start each day with around 15% of our workforce not available, because the vacancy rate and the sickness rate are both 7.5%. You can see then why we've got such a challenging set of circumstances for people to operate within. So that will form part of our plan this year in terms of trying to address some of those workforce shortfalls and trying to reduce the burden on our current workforce. We hope to see an impact on that over the coming months. That's probably what I want to draw attention to. Thank you.
You heard the full report from colleagues. Are there any questions or comments that anybody would like to make? Okay, Patsy.
Yeah, just a couple really. I'll give you them both first. The first one is around the industrial action by WAS and what impact that has had on CTM. Understanding that. And the second one is around the stroke. And I know we've discussed stroke earlier today, but there's a comment in here about CTM formalising action plans in April. My understanding, and I've actually seen it and had a discussion with it around it, that action plan is already there and complete, and it is just being tweaked. So it probably reads as if there is nothing in place, and clearly there is. And do we have a date yet for when Southmead Hospital will commence with thrombectomy?
Do you want us to respond in the order that you asked?
So I'm happy to pick up in terms of the West industrial action. So it's you know, we prepared for it. We had controls, you know, silver and bronze control room and structure in place for it. We worked very hard to make sure that we had some offloading capacity so that we could work to release crews. And for the vast majority of those days, it worked really well. So we didn't have prolonged delays. Ambulance conveyance volumes were lower. Our total ED attendance numbers were consistent. So patients that weren't conveyed in by ambulance then came in by family or other routes. So we didn't see a drop in our attendances, but we did see a drop in the number of ambulances. We worked very hard to ensure additional capacity for discharge, because not only were the treble 9 ambulances affected, but actually it also had an impact on our discharge fleet. And as you know, that's so crucial to maintaining flow. But I have to say that the structure and the process and the teams work really well, and I'm thankful that we didn't have significant challenges. I'm acutely aware that WAST are doing their own understanding of what happened within the community during the appearance of industrial action, where I think there have been greater level of impact.
And then sorry.
No, just to go ahead as an advisory role.
Thank you. In terms of the stroke services, so helpful feedback in terms of the phrase, and I think what this was trying to capture was the fact that the ops team are pulling together an improvement plan with specific trajectories. So it will be about combining that with the existing action plan that you've seen. I can make sure that the future updates reflect that. And then in terms of the 24/7 thrombectomy at Bristol, we've not got a date yet. They've got some recruitment challenges, I think, in terms of their specialist nursing team.
Did you want to come in and go?
Yes, please, thank you. 2 questions. One about the complaints report. There's no mention of what happens to complaints if they're not, I presume that's all internal. So is there any data on referrals then on to the Commons?
Yes.
I presume it's very low.
Yeah. So we do, I guess the same as the people report, we do go into a lot more detail, go around in quality and safety, periodically in terms of ombudsman.
Yeah. And the other thing was a more general comment, really, that on the face of, on first glance at these reports, it's difficult to pick up because there's been a need for a lot of explanation. You know, it's either red or green, and red can be, missed by 2% or missed by 25%, and whereas there are obviously perhaps 50 shades of red or 50 shades of green. Yeah. And I just wondered whether there was any way of presenting up perhaps more in a more visual way the nuances that have needed to have been expressed in the meeting. Yeah.
So before I to me, could just say, just noting, I know Linda mentioned earlier that we'll be looking at a different way of reporting performance in the future, as we'll be looking at it from April onwards, as I understand. Yeah. If I could, sorry, and I assume your question correlates to what was being proposed earlier. So if I can invite.
Well, I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. There is a lot of data in this report. Part of the rationale of having the session in April is to try and understand from you as IMs, what are the things you like in the report, what do you not like, what do you find too much detail, how would the presentation be more visual, how would some of the narrative that you hear described perhaps help underpin your understanding of the numbers that you're seeing. So I think it's a really valid point. I think if we're honest, we've been in this cycle of the reports post-COVID. Now's the real opportunity, and I think I'm sure with Jonathan coming as new chair as well, there's an opportunity for us to re-look at the reporting and say, is it giving you the right level of assurance at the right level of granularity or not? And correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, but that's part of the rationale for the session in April, isn't it?
Something that's missed by 30% needs to scream.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So just sorry, just on that, because I guess absolutely what you just said, and that key bit at the end of the things that are bothering us as well, that really, is as much as what you need to see and what you want to be assured by, it's as much as these are the red flags that we're bringing forward. So that is definitely part of the scope of our presentation.
And with the green as well.
Yeah.
Mel?
Yeah, can I go back to mortality, Sally, please? Because honestly, that is so important. It tells us so much about what's going on. It's far more than figures. It's people dying within the hospital environment. And it's quite startling when you can see that here we are with 20.95 and almost double the Cardiff and the Vale of God. Yeah. So what I was going to ask is, when you and John have actually completed whatever you're going to do, I think it's so important that either you report out the QNS or PPNF, because this really is important. It can tell us so much. And this is my antennas up, and I just want to assure us that there's not something else happening.
I agree, and that's what we're looking at. And I think the way that mortality at the moment is reported is extremely good.
And age profiles as well.
Yes, exactly. Please. So we need all of that and report it in a more meaningful way. So that is exactly.
Yeah, because that's really it's a grenade waiting to explode if we get it wrong. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just the other thing I was just going to say is, Gethin's one back to the beginning of Gethin's presentation around particularly elective care performance, the cancer performance. and I was just reflecting on the conversation we had with the minister the other day. I think it might be worth us on the back of that meeting, perhaps you or Jonathan writing to the minister to give a bit of an overview, because I'm not sure she's got the complete picture of all the things that are going on within some of our, which actually, yeah, we acknowledge the performance is not where it needs to be, but there's a lot of things that are being done to get us back on the trajectory. And I think and I know there was a council summit only yesterday, wasn't it, with the minister there, but I think given that we had a meeting with her where she raised this with us, it probably would be an opportune moment just to write back to her, perhaps with a letter draft by Gethin, just to reassure her of the range of the actions that are in place to try and improve our position, and the commitment of the board. It'd be quite perhaps useful to say that we talked about it today at the board. The investment we're making in electric care, focus on it from the ops team. We wanted to make sure we gave the assurance based on our meeting with her the other night.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be helpful and interesting. Just on that discussion, Paul. One of the important points I felt raising at that meeting was the amount of work that is going on within the organisation, the stuff that we don't see actually measured as natural performance indicators. You know, and similarly, I was thinking in relation to how you're measuring that performance going forward. Obviously, there's government targets which we must adhere to and work towards. There's also an INTP target that we've got in place as well that we're working towards as we're going forward. Is that we you know, it's assuring ourselves that we're on our INTP plan target as well as we're driving towards the Welsh Government target. And the other thing I'd say as well is when you think about the significant amount of work that's gone in place across our health board in recent years, you know, when you think about the governance challenges and the like around establishing systems, processes, training people, getting people ready, changing operational working methods, the like. There is a significant amount of work that we've been doing as a health board that we don't necessarily report anywhere. And it's and I think by pulling a letter together, as Paul suggested, that would be very helpful to just describe that. So we know that it's not that we are not trying to manage performance. There is a significant amount of work going on in respect of the infrastructure, development, etc., for us to get to where we want to get to meet those Welsh Government targets as well. Are there any further comments or questions in respect of development? Sorry, Dilys, my apologies, Dilys. I didn't see your hand up earlier.
I thought you missed my phone.
That's right. That's right. Put your hand up, Dilys. I was looking to see which one it was, but no, seriously. My apologies.
If I refer to the last contribution we had on the last item about the importance of recognition and recognition of staff, etc. I'd like to congratulate Howell and his team on the CIPD award for the work they've been doing on PGR.
Doesn't that make you feel better now, Howell?
Yes. I think earlier we were talking about apologies for Kevin as well as apologies for not. No, very serious note. Well done to Howell and the team. And the other question I just want to do, just ask Kevin, is that and children and young people under the age of 18 have seen access to services, but I noticed that our performance is low in that area. I suppose what would be, I think what might be helpful to understand, I mean, it's not necessarily today, is that there are a lot of people get referred into services who do not necessarily meet the criteria, and it's based on the services available that we have in our patch. And I know across Wales, they're starting to develop these single point of access services for children and young people, which is helping to target where children should be seen by, whether it's education or local authority, not just help. And it does help in the commissioning and training perspective as well going forward.
Yeah, very much. And we are we are developing RSPA for children's. We're also working with a variety of online tools and other things to support guidance and access, because recognising not everyone needs to be seen in that full-blown clinical environment. So yeah, very much part of their plans.
Thank you. Okay. Just I think I'll double check. There's no further hands up or anything. Okay, then can I just say that thanks to executive colleagues for the report, and in conclusion, concluding the item, the board resolves to note this report. If I could then go on to item 6.4, please, which is the Integrated Performance Dashboard Part 2 for financial performance. And I invite Sally May to present the report, which is before the board for noting. Sally.
I'll treat the report as read and just draw out a couple of issues. As at month 10, this is our position as at month 11. At month 10, we revised our forecast core plan deficit down from 26.5 to 24.5. That was on the basis of sustained improvements in forecasts in a number of areas and some movements. While it sounds significant, it is a minor variation, but it's important that we commit to this level. We've now received funding for exceptional costs at 16.9 and COVID costs at 30 million. Where we're monitoring that carefully, and we have to manage any subsequent movements within our overall position. And then it's probably just worth us going back to where we were earlier around our core plan deficit. So that's at 60.9, which was a 32.9 million deterioration from our planned recurrent deficit. And then on top of that, there was the COVID response costs at 10 and exceptional costs, which at that point in time was 13.8, giving the 84.7. As we saw earlier, that's now mitigated down a little bit in terms of energy, but it's still a really significant deterioration in year, and is largely the result of difficulties in delivering recurrent savings. Cash flow, I just want to draw your attention to, because you'll remember having a deficit meant we needed to apply for cash. That was provided for the core deficit of 26.5, and then there was a remaining element around what's known as working capital movements. So we've now got the strategic cash support in place, and so there's a sort of potential minor deficit at the year end, which we will manage. But I think that's an improved position from earlier in the year, where that was significantly at risk. And finally, just to draw your attention to capital resource limit for the year is 72.3 million. As at month 11, we've spent 61.6 million. A significant work going on to finalise the cash position. Further expenditure has been, as some items have dropped off because of timing, others have been brought in. So I think it's fair to say more resources have been directed into the capital replacement IT programme in recent months. So we're hoping to land that one where we need to, so we're forecasting break even to the cash resource limit, which, given it's quite a sizable programme, will be a significant work programme, and Rosie Cabell and the team have been working really hard to make sure we maximise the benefit of that. That's all I really wanted to draw your attention to, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I invite board members to raise any questions or comments if anyone's got any in respect to the board that we presented.
Just one very quick question that you probably can't answer yet. Do we know what month 12? Are there any red flags for month 12 at the moment? Particularly in the exceptional items where spending's going to have to.
There isn't. I mean, what we've seen some improvements, as I said, in terms of energy pricing, but I think we're pretty fixed around where we think things will land. There's always the potential some variation, but we've got our sort of plans for year end quite well advanced now to deliver on the position. It's always a challenge, and everybody's focused on it. And clearly, we're aware that this year we've got a sort of longer audit programme as well, because the audit programme will be delayed to sort of 31st of July for final sign off, and we're working with Audit Wales around how we sort of get the best out of that, get ahead of the sort of year-end processes as well, so that we can focus on the new year rather than on the old year. So I think there's I am very hopeful that we'll land where we should do.
I just wanted to say also well done on the capital spend, because most organisations will see a massive jump in capital spend in the last 2 months, and here it has been very, very gradual, very controlled, and that takes a lot of doing.
Yeah, Rosie and team have worked incredibly hard on this programme.
Okay, thank you for that, Patsy. Thank you, Sally. I have no further questions or comments, and I thank Sally for the report. The board resolves to note the report. If I could now go on to item 6.5, please, which is the Audit Wales review and the structured assessment. And I invite Sarah Atherley to present the report before the board for noting. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I will assume members have read the report, but if I could just highlight some key points. So overall, we found that the Health Board's corporate governance arrangements have continued to develop this year. We found that the conduct of the board was effective and there were some positive aspects, including the self-reflection on performance as well. As was mentioned before, we have noted that the board level arrangements for overseeing the condition of the estate and scrutinising capital programmes and projects does require some strengthening, and we've made some recommendations in that area. And we've also recommended some areas to help improve transparency of the board business as well, including making the agenda for private board and committee meetings public so that people can understand what topics have gone into those private sessions. The implementation of the board assurance framework this year is of notable success for the organisation, complemented by the continued work on risk management arrangements across the Health Board, which have continued to evolve and become stronger. And we recognise this will always be a continual process, and as you move forward into new care group structures, that's obviously an area of focus. Work on the long-term strategy for CTM 2030 has been positive this year, good engagement across a range of stakeholders, and that does provide a clear framework for the preparation of the clinical strategy moving forward again, which is something that's been raised today. The Health Board produced an annual plan this year, and although we feel that the board maintains effective oversight of the Health Board's approach to strategic planning, we feel that the corporate plans and strategies would benefit from clearer, measurable outcomes and clearer summaries of the key actions and deliverables, just to kind of enable that scrutiny of delivery against plans. And performance challenges, as discussed, are significant, and we've recommended that the Health Board should ensure that the performance management and reporting arrangements are appropriately focused on the key challenges, which again is a discussion that you've had today in session. The financial challenges for the Health Board are significant alongside other health boards in Wales, and we've made some recommendations around strengthening the financial management arrangements to address the risks and the sustainability in the short to the medium term. And we've also identified some areas where financial controls could be strengthened, including the processes for reviewing and improving capital programmes and projects. We've made 10 recommendations which have been accepted by the Health Board, and we've received the organisational response to this, which we'll take to the next Audit and Risk Committee for scrutiny. I'd just really like to take this opportunity to thank the Health Board for its support in completing this work and all of the effort from all of the individuals involved. It is very, very much appreciated. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Sarah. I invite board members to raise any questions. Paul.
Sarah, thank you. Just on the point about the performance reporting, and you've just heard the conversation we've had, it'd be really interesting if you've got any examples of other places that you've worked with where you've seen perhaps different performance reports, or where you've seen someone do performance reporting really well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something perhaps outside of this you could have a chat with Linda or Callie about, and just signpost us to anybody you think is doing this particularly well, because I think it may be quite a bit of helpful intel to take into that session in April for us to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, by all means, and I did meet with Gethin the other day, and I was having a conversation about some of this as well. So, but by all means, I can link in with Callie and Linda on that.
Thank you.
Patsy.
Yeah, just quickly on reading this and on reading it, it almost feels at odds with what you've said, Sarah. It felt harsh, given the level of improvement that's happened just over the last 18 months. This report felt harsh, and I'm not going to go into any detail. I reserve that for the scrutiny at the audit and risk, and then when I've seen the management responses to the recommendations. But I did just feel on reading it that it was harsh.
I think it's probably something that we need to kind of have a conversation of in audit and risk. I mean, there's obviously, I can't respond to the general tone if there's specific areas in there that you feel is overly harsh. I obviously felt it was a balanced report, and obviously this has been out to clearance with the organisation. So if there was any areas in there that felt that we've missed the mark on, then there was an opportunity then to kind of feed that back through clearance. But I take your comments on board.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other points of note or questions or comments? No. Okay, if I could then thank you, Sarah, for presenting your report today, and board resolves to note the report. Okay, if I could then go on to the next item, 6.6, which is the Audit Wales Annual Audit Report, please. I invite Sarah Atlee to present the report, which is before the board conducting. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I will assume that members have read the report, but just to summarise, this is the Auditor General's Annual Audit Report, which is a summary of the 2022 audit work which we've undertaken to fulfil our responsibilities under the Public Audit Wales Act of 2004. The document covers the audit of accounts as well as the arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness and the use of resources. Again, a thank you to the Health Board in supporting the delivery of our audit programme this year. The content you will have seen throughout the report, so I wasn't proposing to go into any further detail, and both Mark and I are present and happy to take any questions on that document.
Thank you, Sarah. I invite board members to raise any questions or comments you may have. No further questions or comments. Can I thank you, Sarah, for the report, and I can conclude that the board resolves to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I could then go on to item 6.7, which is the annual board effectiveness self-assessment. I invite Callie Hamlin to present the report, which is before the board for approval. Callie.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, we've shared this with board members offline, so I'm not going to go into great detail because you've been involved in this self-assessment, but it is good practice on an annual basis to review our annual board effectiveness, and we do that in line with our Code of Corporate Governance Code of Conduct and other areas of internal assurance and external assurance. So I thank you all for your commitment offline to review this and agree the level of maturity score of a 4. Just to say again, which I've already shared with you, we've got our reflections in light of the BCU corporate governance and board effectiveness arrangements built into this report. So I'm hoping that it gives you that sort of collective view internally and externally in terms of our self-assessment. And I just recommend to the board that we agree our self-assessment score of 4.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? No. Thanks to Callie for presenting the report. In conclusion, the board resolves to approve this report. We could then go on to item 6.8, which is the Quality and Safety Committee highlight report. I invite Jane Sadgrove to provide members with a verbal update on the items the committee wished to escalate to the board following the Quality and Safety Committee held on the 16th of March 2023. Jane.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies that there isn't a written report, but the meeting schedule didn't allow for that. The committee wished to escalate 2 items, and Gethin's already referred to one of those in his earlier report. The committee had a good discussion on how do we balance risk, and the risks we were talking about were the risks encountered when boarding additional patients on wards, against the risk of failing to release ambulances and failing to attend sick people in the community as a result. The discussion was really positive, but we felt that the whole board would benefit from a wider discussion of the ways we are balancing risk in this area. Chair, we have since agreed that it will be the subject of one of our future development events. I think it's the next one. The second issue arose from the mental health issues that we have already referred to, and in particular as embodied in the HIW reports we received. The committee was concerned at some of the issues that were raised by those reports, in particular some basic processes that clearly needed some attention, but more significantly about the need for an IT system which supported the services more effectively across the piece. And we've already heard earlier in the meeting that WICIS, the proposed solution, is actually in our plan for the coming year, and I'm sure the committee will be most grateful.
Are there any questions or comments anyone would like to take up with Jane? No. If I can then move on, thanks to Jane for presenting the update. The board resolves to note the update provided. If I can then go on to Planning, Performance and Finance Committee highlight report. I invite Mel to present the report highlighting the items contained within the alert escalate section of the report only. Mel.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to the meeting that we had on 28th of February, and both the items that I was going to escalate an alert have already been discussed today. So I'm not going to labour the point. We've already been the Balindra Centre, and of course, Sally has given us a multi-land update, which actually is better than the month 10, which was highlighted. I just leave it at that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mel. Are there any questions or points of note or comments anyone would like to make to Mel on this report? No. If I could then move on to 6.10, please, which is the Digital and Data Committee highlight report. And I invite Ian Welch to present the report highlighting the items contained within the alert escalate section of the report only. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Emrys. In our last meeting, a number of reports that were in that particular meeting highlighted capacity and resource issues. And so we felt that it needed to be escalated at the board level because it was coming out in a large number of those reports. And we discussed a lot of this earlier. So as I say, I don't want to go into too much detail. But I think some of the finance that was announced earlier on will go some way to solving the more immediate and urgent areas that were identified. It doesn't completely go there because our long-term ambitions in terms of digital and data need to be addressed as well. And so it's sort of work in progress. But I think the immediate concerns are probably alleviated as a result of our discussions that took place earlier on. The other thing that we wanted to highlight as well was a positive escalation, because members would be aware of the digital whiteboards that are being used now throughout the area, and they're now being introduced in Bridgend as well. So I don't know if members are aware of that, but they are being used very positively throughout our estate at the moment. And I think we felt in that meeting that there probably wasn't enough understanding of exactly the level of that they're being used and the potential going forward, the development work behind the scenes that's taken place. So we wanted to recommend to board that the demonstration that we had, which was excellent, by the way, was part of a future board development session.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ian. I'll invite board members to raise any questions or comments for Ian, should you wish.
Actually, can I just make endorse everything that Ian's just said, just the particular reference to the Information Commissioner. So I remember the last group, which Ian doesn't know about yet, because and we are still in a very positive dialogue with them, but I think our time is going to come to an end very quickly if we're not careful. So as Ian's alluded to, the resources were put towards that, but we will have a strong focus in the first quarter of next year on completion of that action plan, because I think there's some critical things that we've not been able to progress that we really need to do now. So I just wanted to make you draw that out a little bit.
Okay, thank you for that, Stuart. Okay, no more further comments or questions. No, thanks. Thank you to Ian for presenting the report. The board resolves to note the report. We're going to then go on to item 6.11, Population Health and Partnership Committee highlight report. And I invite Jane Sadgrove to present the report, highlighting the items contained within the alert escalate section of the report only. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is a positive escalation. In a previous board development session, we determined that the Population Health and Partnerships Committee was the committee that would be best placed to look after the University Health Board and research matters. And the committee has accepted that and produced revised terms of reference, which in fact the board has already approved on its consent agenda today. But the consequences of that are detailed within the escalation there, just for noting.
Thank you. I invite board members to offer any questions or comments that they may want to make. No further. Thanks to Jane for presenting the report. The board resolves to note the report. On to item 6.12, the Mental Health Act Monitoring Committee highlights report. I invite Jane Southcroft to present the report, highlighting the items contained within the alert escalate section of the report. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. We've spoken at a number of points about the recent HIW inspection reports. It comes as no surprise that has some implications for the work of the Mental Health Act Monitoring Committee. At the time the committee met, those reports were not in the public domain. They are now in the public domain, and I have asked the operational group to report back to the next meeting of the Mental Health Act Monitoring Committee on any steps that need to be taken in relation to matters raised in those reports.
Thank you, Jane. I invite board members to raise any questions or comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mel.
Yes, thanks, Jane. I happen to sit on the committee with Jane, and I just think, I know it's not for escalation, but there is a significant item there, and that's in relation to the issues on 136. We're an update from South Wales Police, and I know under Jane's chairmanship, we've been pushing this for many years, but the reduction in section 136 arrests, and if you see this, so 40% improvement in a decrease in numbers of people. And for every one of those figures, I think it's 400 less. That means every one of those people has now not been introduced into the criminal justice process. And this is a significant piece of work that's gone on, not just with our health board and all our mental health workers, but also the South Wales Police as well. It is a huge result that mustn't go unnoticed. And thank you, Jane, because I know you've been pushing this as chair.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting that, Mel. As you probably know, I chair the National Crisis Care Concordat. And one of the big aims or main aims of the Concordat was about reducing the numbers of section 136. I think it's also fair to say I had an early conversation with Paul today about the significant amount of work that's been undertaken in the management of crisis since Aaron has taken up the role and reports back to, certainly reports into the Crisis Care Concordat. And what we must remember here is that when people are presenting in crisis now, but a situation where they're getting a therapeutic intervention as opposed to having a police intervention. So it's a really good piece of work, and thank you for highlighting that now. Okay, I then go on to any other business. Not been notified of any other business, but I will invite Paul in.
Well, I think Paul, I can't not say in under AOB, recognising that it did Everest its last board meeting with us. CTM, and I just wanted to place on formal record our thanks, Emrys, for everything you've done for our organisation for the past 18 months. I think you leave the organisation in a very different place to when you joined us. You joined at a pretty critical point on our journey, both in terms of the external scrutiny and the processes we're going through with Welsh Government, but also COVID, end of the COVID sort of peak and all the challenges that brought with us. And also a lot of change and churn in the executive team, changes from the IM team, and in the space of 18 months, I think you've massively supported me, but the whole organisation to really continue on our improvement journey. And we are very much going to miss you as our chair, but also are envious of your ability to go and look on from the outside as we continue on that. But I know you will continue to keep an eye from afar on what we're up to, and I'm sure we will continue to keep in contact with you and keep you updated. And just to say thank you very much on behalf of the organisation for everything you've done and for improving and supporting us in our ambitions of improving the health for our populations, which is what we're all here to do.
To say as well, though, is that I feel very privileged to be the chair of this organisation. Since coming here, you'll remember I've worked in a number of organisations. I can honestly say there's a true sense of team here, in the sense of where the execs are, where the independent members are. Obviously, we've had challenges, not just in the 18 months I've been here, but certainly over the last 4 years, about putting some drive into making change, into supporting development of services in our community. My experience has been incredibly positive. I have witnessed everywhere, from every exec that I've met, every independent member that I've had meetings with, everyone is keen to make a change within this community and for our organisation. And it continues. It's never ever stopped in all the time I've been here. And when you think of some of the tough times that we as a board have gone through, you know, we've had our challenges. We have our challenges to each other, I suppose it's fair to say as well. But more importantly, there's a team here in this organisation now that is working together to make things, you know, better for our population. That's really, really good. I will also say to you is that I've been going out into service as well. You know, and, I've been out to lots and lots of services. And it's picking up perhaps Mel's earlier point about we need to recognise lots of the good things that are going on in our organisation that perhaps we don't promote or market as well as we should do. You know, because there is a phenomenal amount of things. I mean, I went to, I think some of the places I've been to, I didn't even know were there, and then you find out they've won a national award or something. You know, it is quite incredible. And also, you know, we talked in our board meeting here today about, you know, the importance of writing a letter to the minister based on the work that we're doing as an organisation. We acknowledge that we've got the targets that we have to deliver. We're not moving away from those. But more importantly, is making sure that we've got the right infrastructure in place to be able to respond to those targets. And in my view, and I know I will also say, you know, it's been great working with Paul. I do promote him everywhere I go outside. He's definitely, I can honestly say to you, is the best chief executive that I have ever worked with in the sense of understanding the system, wanting to make change and drive, and he's definitely a sorter. So that is great for us as an organisation. So just finally, I know it's all the systems, the structure, the processes, all that we've had to go through, but you've stuck together as a team, and I have to say I'm very proud to be part of it. I was on to, I just thank you. So I just obviously in relation to 7.1 is how do we do in this meeting? I refer board colleagues to the comments regarding this item made during the introductory remarks at the beginning of the meeting, which I ask you to bear in mind. I therefore invite board colleagues to put forward any comments for improvement at this point or within 2 weeks of this meeting, which we do after any one of our board meetings. But then I just want to say that the date and time of the next meeting, next scheduled board held in public, will take place on Thursday, the 25th of May, 2023, commencing at 10 o'clock. And on tonight, item 9 at close of the meeting. Rydym i'n dod â'r cyfarfod o'r bwrdd iechyd I ben a hoffwn I ddiolch I bawb sydd wedi a ni a gwylio cyfarfod heddiw. I now bring the board meeting to a close. I would like to extend thanks to all who have participated in the meeting and our observed proceedings today. Thank you.